Dragon Crew, go for hatch closure.
SpaceX copies. The closeout team is taking final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Stand by for some state transitions before we get into pad hatch closed. A reminder, at this time, ensure all items remain secure from now through launch.
Copies.
And there they are, removing the protective cover for that seal, so they're now ready to do an inspection of it and then get the hatch closed. This is the second launch attempt for Crew-10. There was a launch opportunity on Wednesday, but we stood down from that one due to some ground equipment. In the interim, though, between that attempt and this attempt, the astronauts had some extra time on their hands, and we were talking earlier about them going out to the beach house and, of course, having a variety of experiences for the crew. It's a time to relax, maybe a time to tell a few stories about their time in space between the two veterans, Sam McLean and
Yeah, and I
Takuya.
think one of the biggest things is really just appreciating and enjoying the elements on Earth. And it may be something that Ann and Tak thought more about than Nicole and Kirill, because sometimes you don't really think about it until you've experienced it. But, in space, one of the things that you miss the most is just the feeling of the breeze on your cheeks, the sound of the wind as it rustles through the leaves, the feeling of the warm sun on your skin. Those kinds of things you don't experience with like you do down here on Earth, and you suddenly realize how much you miss them. Mm-hmm. So hopefully out there yesterday at the beach house, they were taking that time. Certainly was a beautiful sunny day, and it was breezy on the beach as well. Yes. So hopefully they were thinking about that. It's not something that really occurs to you until you don't have it anymore. I remember from my mission, or even from when I used to do research in the Antarctic, when I would come home, there's also this very distinct smell of life on Earth. And of course, it's not something that we notice every day, because it's always there, so it's just part of all the background. But suddenly when you don't have it, and then you come back to it, it becomes very, very strong. So I remember coming back from the Antarctic, the plane would touch down, and in the Antarctic it's this cold, austere environment with no natural things growing outside. So when you land again in New Zealand, there's this really powerful smell. And it's just the smell of life. I think it's like the smell of the humidity in the air and all forms of life that are growing that you don't notice until you have it removed. And then it lasts only for a few minutes. So you really have to appreciate it. Like somebody will point it out to you. Because then it's gone. And it's just full in the background again, and you don't notice it anymore. I had that experience coming back from the Antarctic, like I mentioned, also when I did a caving expedition with the European Space Agency in Italy. The same kind of thing. You didn't have any of those smells in the cave, and you come out, you're overwhelmed by it. Your sense of smell is just overwhelmed by it, and it's so fleeting, and it's gone. And the same thing coming back from space, where you're suddenly back, you land, the capsule door opens, and it's this overwhelming smell, once again, of just life.
How about that? For all the excitement of going to space, it's oftentimes these things here on Earth that just give you such a feeling of nostalgia once you come back into it. And that smell of life that you're talking about, that is fascinating. There's really, as we know it right now, no place like Earth.
Yeah, you don't know what you have until it's gone, right?
That's right.
I'm thinking about the crew in there and what are they thinking about right now? And maybe they're taking some time to think about their family members and loved ones that are friends and family that are here today for the launch. And there's a lot of special people here today that I know for all of these crew members. been able to spend quite a bit of time with Anne's family, and she has a lot of friends here as well. The Axiom 4 crew, who will be joining them on the International Space Station hopefully during this mission, they were here for the first launch attempt, but unfortunately they had to go back to training. Peggy Whitson, the commander of that mission, is a close friend of Anne's, and all 4 of those crew members were here as well. Anne's high school friend Steve Gleason is here. If you're not familiar with that name, he was a safety for the New Orleans Saints, and then unfortunately came down with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, but has become quite a notable figure and on behalf of ALS and research and support for that disease. Vapor has an incredible presence here with all of her family and her volleyball team, and I love it. I remember this when Vapor was selected as an astronaut as well. Both Anne McLean and I were actually on the selection board for Nicole Vapor's class, and I remember her family being there to celebrate their announcement. They all had matching t-shirts, and they do again today, her volleyball team as well, so a lot of spirit that they're showing. Kirill, I mentioned he has his host family from when he was a high school student in Texas, as well as friends and family members here from Russia.
Dragon, SpaceX side hatch is closed, and we have begun the side hatch leak check.
Copy.
And Tak has a lot of friends from school and his previous jobs back in Japan, so everybody has an incredible representation of family and friends here to support them. And I bet the crew members are thinking about them a little bit. It's interesting. It's something we've talked a lot about as astronauts, that that this launch day is the hardest for the loved ones, for those friends and family members. As crew members, we are so well trained in every little step along the way that we don't really have any surprises. We know what to expect, and we're pretty calm because you're just doing your job. You're doing what you're trained to do. But it's the family members that really this is the most difficult on, because they don't have that same level of training. They don't necessarily understand all the nuances, and it's their loved one sitting on the top of that rocket. So it's an interesting dichotomy, though, where I think the astronauts are quite calm, but they're probably more worried about their family members and how they're feeling than they are really about themselves right now.
And to draw the connection between you and Anne McLean, you two were in the same astronaut class, and that's how you became close friends.
Yeah, we were selected as part of the 8 Pauls class back in 2013. So 11 and a half years we've been astronauts together, and we have become incredibly close. So this is a very special launch for me to see Anne embark on this second mission, especially because it's just watching her exactly where she should be. Anne is one of those natural born leaders. She just has this aptitude and ability to relate to and lead people in such a powerful way. So seeing her today as the commander of this crew, knowing that her crew is in such good hands, it is a really wonderful thing to see.
Those leadership attributes come out even in the broadcast, as I've observed her just checking in on her teammates, seeing how they're doing. And when she answers questions in press conferences, she has a strong command of how to communicate, and she communicates really well. And that's a key to being a good leader, is to be able to have strong communication skills. Yeah,
she absolutely does. And when we talk about the crew maybe thinking about their family members, I bet Anne right now is thinking about her 3 other crew members and making sure that they are comfortable and safe and have everything that they need. I have seen her do that all throughout the training profile and throughout her time here at KSC leading up to launch as well. She's really taking care of that crew.
From inside the capsule to outside of it, there at the press site, see the countdown clock, a historic site. It's on the National Historic Register, in fact, with the flagpole blowing and a nice breeze going. Weather conditions for liftoff today, they're fabulous. There's your forecast. We are 95% go. Winds are coming 7 to 12 miles per hour out of the south-southwest. Temperature is a mild and comfy 70 degrees. The only concern for that 5% resides in the cumulus cloud rule, and that's because we have a little more moisture in the air than we did 2 days ago. But really, as you can see outside, not a lot of cumulus clouds. You've got those high stratus clouds, but there you see some off in the distance over top of the ocean. But those seem to be pretty thin. Not expecting a lot of moisture in those. So that all bodes well. There's a beautiful shot. The sky is open and clear for this liftoff right now. It's green. Of course, we'll be looking again at the weather, as in fact even more closely as we get closer to launch.
Dragon SpaceX, com check.
SpaceX Dragon, loud and clear.
Core, loud and clear. TDRS com check complete. Stand by for com checks with DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
Dragon D on countdown 1, com check.
DC Dragon, loud and clear.
DC loud and clear. Stand by for com checks with MD.
Dragon MD on countdown 1, com check.
MD Dragon, loud and clear.
MD loud and clear. Stand by for com check over Dragon to ground. Dragon MD on Dragon to ground, com check.
MD Dragon, loud and clear.
MD loud and clear. Stand by for com checks with LD. Dragon LD on countdown 1, com check.
LD Dragon has you loud and clear.
LD loud and clear. Stand by for com check over Dragon to ground. Dragon LD on Dragon to ground, com check.
LD Dragon, loud and clear.
LD loud and clear.
Dragon SpaceX, launch configuration, com checks complete.
All right, with the communication checks complete, that's a good milestone that we are passing now. Able to communicate with the crew both on the ground and through the air. We're now T-minus 2 hours and 9 minutes from launch. The ISS is an incredible orbiting lab and, of course, Crew-10's final destination. Here's a closer look now at how we're getting help here on Earth from all of that revolutionary science research being done up in low Earth orbit.
The International Space Station isn't just a symbol. It's a powerhouse of cutting-edge science, constantly revealing secrets that defy Earth's limitations and drive us farther into the cosmos.
Our mission is research and science. We have experiments mounted on the outside of the station that are looking at Earth. We study our own bodies and how they react to space, to weightlessness, to radiation. And that helps not only us go on further in future missions, but also helps for medical research back home. And then we study lots of different things as well, like materials, combustion, all sorts of things that help us understand life back on Earth.
Yeah!
Microgravity doesn't play by the rules. It flips them upside down, transforming how liquids flow, how flames burn, and unraveling biological mysteries before our eyes.
I saw some heart tissues beating in space, and it was incredible.
Photon, we see that top one beating. Looks like happy heart cells.
But we're not just along for the ride. We're explorers, diving headfirst into the challenge and harnessing the power of this unparalleled platform, just as we have been for decades. We're on a relentless quest for answers, seeking to understand the intricate workings of the human body in space and ensuring future crews stay safe on their daring journeys beyond Earth's orbit.
The human aspect of human space exploration is always going to be very important for decades to come.
And when it comes to technology, we're not waiting around. We're discovering new ways to grow crops in harsh environments and engineering innovations to tackle Earth's greatest challenges.
We have amazing technology that allows us to recycle water and create water for us to drink. It's delicious.
Microgravity isn't just a curiosity. It's a game changer in the fight against diseases back on Earth, paving the way for breakthroughs that benefit us all and enabling new economic opportunities in space.
Welcome Axiom 3 on board the International Space Station.
From our vantage point more than 200 miles above Earth, we are not just spectators. We're gaining unprecedented insights into the world we call home, and we're sharing our findings openly. We're not just achieving results today, we're sparking inspiration in future generations of explorers and embracing the power of global collaboration as we reach for the stars.
What was your favorite experiment on the International Space Station?
Toby, great question. My favorite experiment was the one that I got to eat. It was us growing hatch chili peppers in our plant habitat.
Station Huntsville on 2, we have video in Node 1. Look at those chili peppers.
And as we soar through space at 17,500 miles per hour, each moment is a step closer to unlocking the mysteries of our Earth, our universe, and propelling our pioneering spirit even farther into space. So come along for the ride aboard the International Space Station.
Seeing that video brings a lot of fun memories of my mission. We didn't grow peppers, but we actually grew Mizuna lettuce during my mission, and that was something that I very much enjoyed because you had something green and growing that you were taking care of. You were giving it water every day and monitoring the growth. And then the best part was at the end of the experiment, we processed the lettuce, and some of it, of course, had to go back down for science, but then we were able to enjoy a fresh salad. So that was a big moment for me. And we have so much incredible science going on the International Space Station during all increments. And there are some specific experiments I can highlight today for what this crew specifically will be doing. There are kind of two areas. We're actually gotten into the time now where we even do some science on board the Dragon before the crew docks to the International Space Station. Some of those experiments that they'll be doing in Dragon, they have an experiment called Space Health, which is a Canadian Space Agency experiment. It's a biomonitoring wearable technology garment, and it's looking primarily at things like the cardiovascular system in terms of understanding more about how that system responds to microgravity to make sure that we can monitor these aspects of astronauts and keep them safe on orbit. There's an experiment called Thigh Cuff that they'll be doing in Dragon as well, and this is really a small kind of restraint that they put around their thighs, and this can help prevent and counteract some of the fluid shift that we experience in microgravity. So in microgravity, we have this upward fluid shift of our blood volume where it really leaves our legs, because here on Earth, gravity is pulling, of course, all that blood down to your feet. So in space, you have this upward fluid shift where the blood goes upward into the torso area and in the face. Sometimes you can see that in some of the astronauts, especially as they start adjusting to the microgravity environment. And some of these fluid shifts may be actually contributing to some of the problems that astronauts are experiencing in space. There's one example, the spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, and this has some different hallmark features, but basically it is causing some vision deficits in some astronauts when they come back, and actually changes to the anatomy of the eye, the back of the eye, the retina, and the choroid layer, which has the blood supply for the retina. Some astronauts have an optic disc edema, so a swelling of the optic disc, and also even a flattening of the eyeball. So a flattening of the back of the eyeball actually changes the refraction and changes your vision. This was something that I actually experienced during my mission. I had a pretty severe case of SANS. Luckily, everything is kind of back to normal now, but the one lasting symptom that I have is that I have perfect vision now. When I launched to space, I actually did wear glasses and contacts, and because of that globe flattening, I now have 2015 vision that has persisted for the last 5 years. So, most expensive corrective surgery I think possible. Thank you, taxpayers.
When you mentioned that on Wednesday, it really kind of surprised me that it fixed it. But then I thought about it, and for most people who know, I wear glasses. For people who also wear glasses or contacts, you can have an astigmatism, which is an irregular shaped eyeball. And I was wondering since then if that's what ends up happening. Does it then take that irregular shaped eyeball, which is more like a football, and kind of make it more into a basketball when you go to in terms of your case and getting better?
Not necessarily. In terms of my case, it's not like it's causing an astigmatism, and I didn't have
an
astigmatism.
No, but I'm saying reversing it.
Yeah, well, I didn't have an astigmatism to begin with. That's
see.
Different than just being nearsighted or farsighted.
Okay.
So I'm not sure actually if we have any data on people that experience SANS that have an astigmatism. That's an interesting question on how it would affect that overall shape. This is kind of just a flattening of the back of the eyeball that's normally round, so it changes that refraction, which of course changes, your prescription and changes your vision there. This crew on board Dragon will also participate in an experiment called immunity assay, and this is a new way to monitor health and immune function with a blood sample. So most of the time, historically in space, we take blood samples and we have to send them back down on Earth to be studied by scientists to evaluate them for all these different parameters, for example, immune system parameters. This is actually an in-flight assay that would allow the data to be collected in flight without going back down to the ground. So could be really important in terms of physiology and medical research and also direct health of the astronauts as well.
Yeah, because when the blood comes back down to Earth, instantly gravity is then a factor. So studying it in that microgravity environment while it's up there,
Yeah,
right?
the blood sample itself, the parameters that they're looking at, they won't be changing anymore because they're not. It's not in the human body anymore. But you're right. Now, we are keeping the experiment a little bit more clean since we're never exposing anything back to that 1G environment. When the crew is on the space station, a few of the experiments they'll be participating in, one is the CIPHER study, which is a really large, comprehensive physiological study that has been kicked off in recent years here at NASA. And it's really a multidisciplinary study looking at both physiology and psychological components, and it's comparing different duration missions as well, and will be really important for that comprehensive physiology. For example, applications to SANS, like we talked about. There's an experiment called Drain Brain 2.0 that's really looking at blood flow between the heart and the brain in space and how that changes with microgravity. It involves a special neck collar that the astronauts will wear. And there are some particular flammability experiments, combustion experiments, one called Sophie Mist that the astronauts will be participating in. This is something that we do quite frequently, combustion experiments in space, because if you think about it, of course, even flames burn differently when we don't have this natural air motion and convection caused by gravity. This particular experiment is looking at different models for flammability that can be used on future space missions and has terrestrial applications for combustion models as well. So lots of different types of science, really engaging and really important, not just for the future of astronauts and future space exploration, but direct applications to disease states and other factors back down here on Earth.
The burning stuff in space sounds like fun.
It is fun. Don't worry. It's very well contained.
Oh, you're just not taking a match.
Yeah, definitely. We have a special facility where it's a very contained environment in a glove box where we do these types of experiments, so we can make sure that we keep the astronauts on the space station safe.
Oh, that's important. We are at T-minus 1 hour and 59 minutes and counting from liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and Endurance Dragon spacecraft from Launchpad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. Crew-10, as you can see here, currently inside Dragon. So far, Crew-10 has completed their comm checks to make sure they can communicate with the teams here on the ground. Their seats have rotated from their upright to their reclined launch position, which allows them to see and access their display panels. They have also completed their suit leak checks to make sure that their spacesuits are working properly. We also heard verification that we have a good side hatch leak check, so that's good. If you've been watching us since we came on the air at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, you know that we've had fantastic commentary from NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. My name's Daryl Nail. I get the pleasure and the honor to sit next to her and help document this journey to the launch pad with all of you. Let's go over the crew so you have a sense of a little bit about the folks who are inside the capsule today. We'll start with our crew commander, Ann McLean. This NASA astronaut is a West Point graduate and U.S. Army colonel who has spent 204 days in space and completed 2 spacewalks. She's a highly decorated Master Army aviator with over 2,000 flight hours.
Post-ingress briefing.
SpaceX Dragon, go ahead.
Good news. At this time, we're tracking no issues with Dragon or Falcon proceeding with launch today at this time. So I have no updates for you, but we'll continue to keep you up to date if anything happens. Otherwise, the closeout team is performing their final steps in the White Room before they depart the pad. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon, copy, no issues. Great work to the team.
That's a great update. Working no major issues. The launch vehicle, the spacecraft, the ground systems, all good as we watch the closeout crew continue to do their work before leaving the launch complex. And just to wrap up on Ann, she's a former rugby player and a pretty good one from what I hear. She got the nickname Animal.
Yeah, she is pretty tough. We talked earlier about her need for speed, and I think that leads into the story we told on Wednesday that I have to retell about how she has a particular inclination to operate vehicles in complex situations. And this one goes back to high school, where she apparently ordered a pizza so large it could not be transported in the car. So she and her friend got in the car, they put the pizza on top of the car, and Anne, as the driver, natural commander seat of course, had her left arm up on top of the car to hold the edge of the pizza box and her right hand on the steering wheel, and her friend had her right hand up on the other side from the passenger seat. So Anne is really ready for anything, I would say, in terms of transportation and complicated vehicle setups.
And where in the world is it that you can order a pizza that's as big as the roof of a car?
Spokane, Washington, apparently.
Apparently so, right? Wow.
Colossal something, I guess they were called.
Ah, okay. Well, it's a good thing it didn't come off the roof, because it sounds like it would cover an entire windshield. So good job, Ann. Hey, let's talk about our Crew-10 pilot now, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. She's a U.S. Air Force major and graduate of the Air Force Academy. Nicole has flown the T-38 and the F-22 Raptor, logging over 1,400 flight hours, including 200 in combat. This will be her first space flight, making history as the first astronaut from NASA's 2021 class to fly. And she has said that that is very special to her. She feels humbled by it, and she's flying stuff up into space for her fellow classmates in honor of her being able to go first.
You know where she got her call sign, Vapor?
I do not.
It's an interesting story as well. You know, she's an F-22 pilot, and apparently is one of her early flights, and I think she had a formation flight with her colonel or something as her on-wing, so big deal flight. She got ready to start the aircraft, and suddenly as she was doing so, there was some kind of smoke building in the cockpit. So her training kicked in, and she was abort, 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 quick, you know, ready to leap into action and abort that engine start. And turns out it was just condensation. So that's how she became known as Vapor.
The vapor that condensated onto her glass inside the cockpit. Well, it's as good a nickname as any. I thought you were going to say that she pulls really hard G's and creates a vapor trail, and that's what I thought you were going
well,
with.
That too.
Oh, that works as well.
She is a jet pilot.
Yes, she is indeed. Let's move on to our mission specialist now, Takuya Onishi. He's our JAXA astronaut on board. He's returning to space for his second mission. A former commercial pilot, he spent 113 days aboard the space station in 2016 and then became the first Japanese astronaut to capture the Cygnus spacecraft. When he's not training as an astronaut, he enjoys flying, hiking, movies, and playing the saxophone.
Also serving as a flight director. You know, he, after his second flight, got certified as a flight director and was actually acting as a flight director on the ground in the Mission Control Center in Japan for even up during his training flow until his last trip to Japan. So really exceptional experience for him, because it really gives you that kind of perspective that's so vital as an astronaut, to understand the ground really intimately. A lot of us as astronauts work as Capcoms in the Mission Control Center, talking to the astronauts from the Mission Control Center, and that affords that as well. But being a flight director is even more impressive. So well done for Tak for keeping that up. He even has an asteroid named after him.
Yeah, you mentioned that before, and I'm still very curious at how that came about.
We'll have to dig that one up.
Yeah, but you know, you mentioned his qualifications, which flows into his upcoming assignment as ISS Station Commander. Those are some great qualifications. The fact that he has seen it from both sides, both in space and on the ground. The second mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, a former airline co-pilot. This will be his first trip to the International Space Station. Trained in skydiving, zero gravity, scuba diving, and wilderness survival, he's ready for the challenges of space. Not a man of very many words, but when he does speak, he's very succinct, very clear.
Kirill, we talked about the fact that he had never seen a bear until he went to California, even though he grew up in Siberia. But another great fact that I came across from his colleagues was that, in this region in Siberia, it's very close to the Mongolian border, which is an incredible part of the world, where I actually had the opportunity to go to do some research to study bar-headed geese in Mongolia, and it is a very special area. But one of the things that's special about that area is that they do a lot of throat singing. It's this old traditional form of singing that's really deep and guttural from the back of the throat. I won't even try to do it because I can't, but if you've never heard it, you should definitely Google it and see. But apparently Kirill does throat sing.
He can do it?
He can. So I wonder if he's doing any of that for them in the capsule.
I've heard this, just so happened to have heard it, and I was fascinated by the sound that they make with their throat in this singing. It's really pretty cool. At first I was like, oh, whoa. But there was a very popular commercial on TV in which they had some of that throat singing, and that's where I first heard it, so I had to go look it up.
It is very cool.
That is pretty cool, yeah. We are T-minus 1 hour and 49 minutes until the liftoff of NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission. We have 3 astronauts and 1 cosmonaut inside of Dragon Endurance atop a Falcon 9 rocket. They're at Launch Pad 39A. They are headed to the International Space Station to help maintain the orbiting lab. Once on board the International Space Station, Crew-10 will become members very briefly of Expedition 72 for a few days. And there you see the members they'll be joining, Crew-9. And then they will become part of Expedition 73. They will conduct research to understand material flammability, contributing to the future spacecraft design, and study how spaceflight affects human physiology and psychology. And that's their patch.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, Daryl. The Expedition 73 patch was designed to honor the science and scientists that make space exploration possible. And if you look at some of the elements on the patch here, the number 73 is a prime number and a binary palindrome. There's a good one for Pi Day for all the NASA geeks watching today. And that's represented at the base of the patch. 73 is also a star number, represented by the hexagonal shape of the patch, accented by white stars, and symbolize the crew's dedication to space exploration. The grid lines illustrate our earthly perspective from the cosmos, and finally the ISS, the International Space Station, symbolizing humanity's continued collaboration across space and time.
Those grid lines to me look like something out of an 80s video game.
Yeah, or the Matrix. I believe Johnny Kim was the mastermind behind this mission. I believe we talked about it on Wednesday, but the way that we start a new expedition on board the International Space Station, it actually rotates not with the Dragon flights, but with the Soyuz flights. So Expedition 73 will begin on April 8th with the launch of that Soyuz mission. Sergei Ryzhikov, Alexei Zubritsky, and NASA astronaut Johnny Kim for his first flight.
Well, we have a moment. Let's take another social question. Let's see. Landon Davidson asks, how long does it take to readjust to gravity on Earth once you return?
Well, Landon, like all things physiology related, there is a bit of individual variation, so different humans experience it a little bit differently. For me, it was interesting when I went to space, I actually adjusted very quickly. Even though, as humans, we've never evolved without gravity, I felt really comfortable and like I was at home. Some astronauts do experience space motion sickness, though, for those first few days, where they may feel a little bit queasy, even a little bit nauseous, maybe even vomiting a little bit. But that's normal and usually resolves in the first few days. And most of these effects are really due to your neurovestibular system. So your inner ear, we have these semicircular canals and some other organs that are actually gravity dependent in terms of how they work for your neurovestibular system, which is of course responsible for spatial awareness and balance and those types of things. So that system goes a little bit haywire when you first experience microgravity, and then once again after you've adapted to that and you come back down to Earth. So when you come back down to Earth, you don't feel great. You literally feel gravity, kind of like the bully on the playground that has their hand on your head and is pushing you down. You feel the weight of gravity when you're sitting down, like you just feel heavy. You go to get up from sitting on the couch. I remember having some lower back pain that actually persisted for many months. I just felt really stiff, like I was suddenly 80 or 90 years old and I couldn't, quite straighten out my back. But overall, astronauts generally adjust pretty quickly. In those first few minutes and even hours, you're a little bit like a drunken sailor when that neurovestibular system is really kind of readjusting. Some people have a little bit of motion sickness in those first few days. I didn't really have that. I was pretty fortunate. And then, you readapt to things like walking kind of quickly because your body just, gets used to it. You'd been doing it for so many years before flight. It takes a little bit longer to adapt to running because it's this more complex motor neuron connection for running than it is walking. And I remember that very well. I was in the gym with my trainer and, she's like, okay, go ahead, run across the gym. And it felt so strange as I took kind of that upstroke of one foot. It felt normal. But then when I landed my foot, I felt like I was an elephant crashing down to the ground.
Wow.
And, we run in space on the treadmill every day, every other day. And so you're used to running, but you're not really used to running at your full body weight because in weightlessness, we have a harness that we use to hold us down on the treadmill, but we usually only run at about 75% of our body weight. And of course, it's so different when you're not under the full effect of gravity. So running takes a lot longer to kind of get normal again. So depending on what exactly you're talking about, the first days, even weeks, you feel pretty tired, but then you adapt fairly quickly after that, and maybe some lingering effects for some people, back pain and that kind of thing, but really a lot of individual variation there.
And you touched on it. It's not like you're not working out on station. Your exercise is part of your daily regimen, and you're staying as fit as you possibly can. So it's really interesting that when you come back down, that neurovestibular system, that's the thing that's not used to it and is throwing everything off.
Yeah, because your cardiovascular system, you are running and bicycling every day pretty much up there to maintain your cardiovascular system. But of course, the rest of the time, your cardiovascular system is not acting against the force of gravity like it is here on the ground all the time. So there's some level of deconditioning that just happens where, on the space station, I'm up there. I loved running on the treadmill. You kind of feel like a gazelle since you're a little bit offloaded.
I feel fast.
And yeah, even your gait changes, your stride changes a little bit because of the mechanics of running are just different up there when you're not under your full body weight and you're kind of, you're being held down by this harness. But I really, really enjoyed it. But you're running for miles, every day. So Sonny Williams did and a few other people have actually done marathons.
Dragon SpaceX closeout team has departed the crew arm.
SpaceX Dragon copies.
So what happens is when you come back down to Earth, you just like, even though you've been running miles a day, you come back to Earth and you can't even run a mile because you've had this kind of cardiovascular deconditioning. So that takes a little bit longer to come back.
Interesting, from a marathon to struggling with a mile just because of the change in coming back from space to Earth. Well, we are now T-minus 1 hour and 42 minutes and counting. Let's take you now inside Mission Control in Houston, where flight controllers are constantly monitoring the International Space Station and the people living on board. NASA's Gary Jordan is there. Good afternoon, Gary.
Good afternoon, Daryl and Jessica. Thank you. This is Mission Control Houston, and we're in the International Space Station's flight control room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. The team continues to prepare for launch, led by Flight Director T.J. Creamer. Today we'll be, of course, launching the 10th rotational crew mission to the International Space Station under the agency's Commercial Crew Program. Following Crew-10's arrival, the space station will have a total of 11 crew members aboard for just a few days. 4 of those 11 crew members include the Crew-9 cadre, with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Butch Wilmore, and Sonny Williams, alongside Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. During the next few days, Crew-10 will go over handover procedures with the off-going Crew-9, including a safety briefing and orientation. Then the new crew will jump right in to help advance scientific knowledge and demonstrate new technologies. After a few days of handover activities, the members of Crew-9 will prepare for their undocking and return to Earth. Direct handovers between crews allow for continuity of the activities and helps to ensure a continuous U.S. presence on the space station, which is now at 24 years and counting. Ahead of Crew-9's return, NASA astronaut Sonny Williams turned over command of the space station to Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin. In just a few weeks, NASA astronaut Johnny Kim and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Ryzhikov and Alexei Zubritsky will join the on-orbit crew. Shortly after the departure of the Soyuz MS-26, with NASA astronaut Don Pettit coming home, will mark the commencement of Expedition 73, led by the new commander, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. All of this, of course, coming up after today's launch. We continue with the countdown, and with under 2 hours before launch, we'll send it back to Kennedy. Daryl?
If you just join us, this is live coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. We're now T-minus 1 hour and 40 minutes until liftoff, and so far we've had a smooth countdown. No issues with the rocket or spacecraft, and ground systems are looking good for launch. You're looking now at the crew inside their capsule, Crew-10. And one of the first tasks Crew-10 did as a team was design and create their mission patch. There it is on your screen. And here's their description. The SpaceX Crew-10 patch was thoughtfully designed by the 4-person crew. They used AI for the initial inspiration, and then a human artist perfected the design. So as you can see, as you're looking at there, it's a 10-sided patch with the Roman numeral X boldly in the center, representing the ascent and descent that they will do. It's also representing the 10th operational flight of the Dragon spacecraft. Notice the Dragon with its wings fully out in full flight. That's a nod to the 4 crew members who are all professional pilots. The stars are red, white, and blue for the flag colors of each crew member's home country, and the brightest stars represent the crew's closest family members and support system. It's a lovely patch. And it was interesting, Nicole Ayers was asked about it. She said she kicked off the design of the patch when she and her husband initially used the AI image generator to come up with some ideas, but it was really just to kind of kick off some ideas, and she took those then to the human artist, who then was able to artfully design that Crew-10 patch. And I really like that X in the middle and how it's got them ascending into space and then returning to space. It's a good one, and you can see it there represented on the flagpole just below the American flag. Flies the Crew-10 patch on the CCP flag. CCP standing for Commercial Crew Program.
Yeah, it's one of the great things that we do together as a crew. Another one of those traditions like we talked about. You know, I don't know that everybody knows that we really do design those patches by ourselves. So we try to capture the elements that are important to us, special things from our professional and or personal lives, special things about the mission and timing, and just things that mean a lot to all of us as crew members. Oftentimes, you know, we are capturing the international spirit of cooperation and collaboration that's reflected by the makeup of our crew. We talked already about that 50th anniversary of the Apollo-Soyuz mission as well. All of these things really play into our patch design and thinking about what components to put there.
Will you have some artistic influence in your patch if you do a patch one day?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, I did help design the patches for my previous mission and for future missions as well.
Crew-10 is also allowed to have some personal items, as you well know, Jessica. Jessica Meir, astronaut with NASA, joined us here on the broadcast. They get to take them with them for their stay, their extended stay in space. And for this crew, here's a few things that they will be taking up. Anne McLean, her and her crew were able to pack some personal gear to meet them on the ISS. It's going up on SpaceX 32 in April. She packed some sports team shirts, and those are from the schools she attended, along with some holiday gifts for the crew. Commander McLean said, most importantly, she was able to pack a memento for multiple people who worked on this flight to support her either personally or the mission as a whole. Those items will be returned to their owners after flight, and they include things like pins, necklaces, and rings. It's neat to have some jewelry that's flown in space. Takuya Onishi, he's having a lot of pictures of his family, friends, and colleagues sent up. He's also flying some banners from elementary schools he participated in when he was a small kid.
Yeah, it's always fun to bring a few of those personal affects from home. You know, one of the things as astronauts that's so important to us is being able to share this mission. You know, this is not just for us as individuals or even just for us as a crew. This is really a mission for everybody. Everybody at NASA and all of our partner agencies, all of the people of our countries, really all of the citizens of the world. So we try to bring up things to represent that, whether they're from, you know, universities that we attended, different organizations we belong to, things that really represent all of the different people who helped us get where we were and where we currently are on the International Space Station, and to really bring it back to them, to tie it to them as well, to share the mission and remind everyone that this is truly for them and for all of humanity.
And just add a note about Nicole. She said she's taking items from alma maters and the Air Force volleyball team, which you mentioned. Some of them are here today.
Yeah, they are.
She's also taken a bunch of pictures of her friends and family so she can keep them close. And since she's the first person from her astronaut class to go to space, she's also taking up something for her classmates, the Flies, of course, Group 23. But she didn't want to say what it was. She wants it to be a surprise. But she said that she's getting nothing but love and support from her classmates.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that they are all so proud of her today. So excited for her. I never forget that first moment when you see your first classmate launch. It really does feel different. You know, you get to know all of the other astronauts and cosmonauts that are flying, and every launch, of course, is very special when it's one of your friends or colleagues. But it's a little bit different when you see your own classmate, because it just makes it more real for you. You know, your classmates are like your friends and family, and they started at the same time as you, and it just gives this extra dose of reality of, you know, wow, I didn't just become an astronaut. We actually are going to have the chance to go to space now. So very exciting day, I know, for all of the Flies.
And a relaxing one for Kirill Peskov, who's on the left side of your screen, who looks to be taking advantage of some relaxing time before liftoff.
Absolutely. Maybe he's getting ready for some throat singing. You know, maybe this is part of the process.
He just heard me. He woke up. Yeah, he's got to let me clear my throat. Well, as Crew-10 launches, that means that Crew-9 will return home soon. Crew-9 launched from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station back on September 28th, 2024. And that was a unique flight because it was only 2 crew members in order to make room for Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, who, of course, flew up on a Boeing Starliner test flight, but are now coming down in those 2 open seats with Crew-9. That capsule is on station right now. Wilmore and Williams have been living and working on the space station now for over 9 months, the other 2 for a little over 5 months. Once Crew-10 arrives, there will be what's called a direct handover for 4 days, which is going to be shorter than usual. And then, of course, Crew-9 will undock and come back home. And so that's going to be a quick handover period that they're going to have, a little different than the longer week or so that they have.
Yeah, it depends on what's going on, with comings and goings of different spacecraft. So those handover periods can be variable also because, we never know exactly when the Dragon's going to leave because we have to have good weather prediction for landing. So you never know exactly how long they'll be, but we do have to plan for something. This one is called a 2+2 handover. So we'll have 2 days of dedicated handover activities where the crew members that are up there, the experienced crew members, will be handing over all the important information, how they do things. Of course, this new crew is well trained on all the systems and everything up there, but there is just something to understanding exactly the lay of the land when you see it in person. Little nuances that you can really only get from the crew members that are up there, you can't necessarily get from the ground teams. So we take that time to really hand over all of that really important information. That will be, especially for the new astronauts that have never been on board, but even for Anne and Tak, who are experienced and have been on ISS before, things have changed. It's been years since their mission, so there's different hardware on board, different systems. Some things are running a little bit differently, so really important time. The other component of 2 from that 2+2 is 1 arrival day and then 1 departure day. We will be extremely happy to have Sunny and Butch back down here on Earth. They've been up there for longer than expected, but they were up there in space doing their mission, doing what we do as astronauts, the moment we all wait for as astronauts. So they've had a very productive mission. I love that we saw that image of Sunny running on the treadmill. We talked about how she ran a marathon in a previous missions. I'm not sure if she did it again on this one or not, but I'll have to ask her about that. It'll be great to have them back, and they are coming back with another one of my 8-ball classmates, Nick Hague. So.
Indeed. And a lot has been made about the return of Sunny and Butch, as we know, in the media and the reporting that's been happening about that. What's your sense of it inside the astronaut office that so much attention has been given to their return?
Yeah, definitely a lot of attention. But as I was saying, they are up there doing what astronauts are supposed to do. That is what we live for, and that's really our main intent of being astronauts, is to go to space and to do science and to do maintenance and do all the work that you do on the International Space Station. So it's really no big deal that Butch and Sunny are up there, again, longer than expected, but they're contributing to all the science and all the maintenance on board, just like every other crew member. And it's just something as astronauts that we know we always have to be ready for. We always have to be flexible. You know that there's a plan for your mission. That plan can always change. As you've seen in recent years, there are so many different things that can happen, not just with vehicles, but all different aspects of the space station program. And so, we accept the mission, knowing what the plan is, but knowing full well that there's a very good chance that it can change. And that's just something that, a lot of us are used to from our previous careers as well, that flexibility and adaptability. And I think it's one of our most important skills as an astronaut. And that's what Sunny and Butch have been doing.
You're absolutely right. They went up on a test flight that was supposed to last 8 days, but they were ready to become part of the team up at the International Space Station, working, maintaining. They did spacewalks. They have done it all.
Yeah, they're both very experienced astronauts. They've done International Space Station missions before, so it's not something foreign to them, and they were incredibly productive during their time.
All right, quick social question. We want to get another one up. We had a question come in from Swamp Smoke, who asks, what's one thing about living in space that no amount of training on Earth can fully prepare you for?
Yeah, that one, we get asked that one quite a lot. And what I usually answer, I think, is true. We have so much extensive training that we've talked about today. We know all of these things. We have all this muscle memory for the spacesuit and all the things that we do up there. But what nothing can train you for is how it feels to live and work in microgravity all the time. Just the simple things, like the fact that you can't put your drink down on the table. You can't put your pen down. We've got Velcro on everything. And it's this really, if you see the photos and video of the International Space Station, there's stuff everywhere, on all the walls, on the ceiling, on the floor, cables everywhere. So if you take your drink bag and you Velcro it to a wall because you're up on the ceiling working for one moment, and then you go to a different location, you're on the floor or one of the walls, suddenly you're like, wait a minute, where did I put that drink bag? Because everything blends in this three-dimensional space, and your brain just isn't used to that. Here on Earth, look at us right now. Everything that we're using or looking at is really right down on this desk. We just put everything down, it stays there. We are not using any of this three-dimensional space above our heads or behind us or on the walls. And in space, you utilize all of that. And so it takes your brain some time to really adapt to that, to understand you lose things a lot in the beginning because you put your drink bag down, you don't know where it went because you've been in all these different orientations and positions, and it's really hard to make those connections on spatial awareness. So I think that's the thing that's really difficult. Nothing can train you for it. You can talk to other astronauts and they can give you tips for dealing with some of these things, but until you experience it yourself, you really can't prepare for it.
I lose a lot of stuff on the ground. I can only imagine what I would lose in space. Thank goodness that my wife helps me track it down, along with these little Bluetooth reminders of where my keys and my wallet are. All right, T-minus 1 hour and 26 minutes and counting. Crew-10 getting ready for their mission to the International Space Station, and there you see them from left to right. We have Roscosmos cosmonaut and mission specialist Kirill Peskov. To his left, our right, the pilot, Nicole Ayers. To her left, going to the right, is the commander, Anne McLean. And then to the far right on the screen, mission specialist and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. Up next, it's been a beautiful day so far here on the Space Coast ahead of liftoff. Currently at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 48 seconds. For those who like to know the detail. Our journey today began at astronaut crew quarters at T-minus 4 hours when the astronauts began suiting up after a good weather brief, some breakfast, and health checks. They got into their vehicles and traveled out to the pad. It took about 20 minutes. They ascended the launch tower and then crossed that crew access arm that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. That took them into the white room at the very end of the arm, and they ingressed into the spacecraft where they are now. Got less than 90 minutes until liftoff. They performed this routine exactly as they did today on Wednesday during the first launch attempt. We got down to T-minus 43 minutes until we had an issue with some ground equipment and the hydraulics where there was a trapped pocket of air inside the system. That was fixed and bled out on Thursday, and now the ground support equipment is good to go. The launch vehicle is go, and so is the spacecraft. More recently, the umbilicals, you can see those attached. They're across the back of the rocket, actually, and into the transporter erector. They provided some comm checks through those. We did some suit leak checks for the astronauts inside the capsule. We also did some comm checks, completed those. And the closeout team closed and sealed the hatch right after they got a leak check of its own inside the capsule to make sure that nothing would leak out. There you see it there. And that side leak hatch check is good. Side hatch leak check, rather. Also a final check for FOD, which is foreign object debris. The closeout team carefully examined the area around the seal for the side hatch, and they have since left. They cleared out of the blast danger area, and now the only 4 people who remain inside the perimeter of Launch Complex 39A are right there on your screen. The crew for Crew-10. This Dragon Endurance spacecraft is a special one for NASA. It's also special to Jessica, as you noted so well, and talking about the name of Endurance and a historic ship that helped Shackleton cross the Antarctic. The Dragon spacecraft Endurance will take Crew-10 to space today in its 4th space flight. Since its first flight in 2021 for Crew-3, SpaceX's Endurance Dragon has been a workhorse for NASA's Commercial Crew program, flying mission after mission. It has safely carried astronauts to the International Space Station. With Crew-7, Endurance proved its reliability yet again, marking its 3rd journey to orbit. In all, Endurance has flown 10 astronauts and 2 cosmonauts to and from the International Space Station. And it's supported international crews from NASA, ESA, JAXA, and Roscosmos. Live coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew-10 launch to the International Space Station. We are T-minus 1 hour and 17 minutes and counting until liftoff of Crew-10. on a Falcon 9 rocket to the International Space Station. Crew-10 will be the latest crew to fly as part of NASA's Commercial Crew program, which uses private companies to transport people to and from the orbiting lab from right here on U.S. soil. We've had a great countdown so far. What a beautiful shot. The Indian River Lagoon in the foreground. In the background, the Falcon 9 rocket and Endurance spacecraft with Crew-10 on board. Weather is 95% go. The only tiny concern is the formation of cumulus clouds, but as you can see from this view, we don't have many of those around here, and that's a good thing. Excitement is starting to pick up as we get closer and closer to liftoff, and Jessica, it's been a good day so far.
Yeah, absolutely. The weather looks perfect, and much to Vapor and other Air Force jet pilots' delight, no need for umbrellas today.
That's right.
Crew getting comfortable, getting closer and closer. They're getting excited. You know, Daryl, it's been 5 years since the Demo 2 mission, which was the first crewed mission of SpaceX, and that was an interesting timing. That was actually just after I left the ISS. I left in April of 2020, and Demo 2 occurred in May, and since then, we've had 11 crewed flights. This will be the 11th crewed flight, so this will be the 10th rotational flight for crew members after that Demo 2 flight. So pretty impressive that all of that has happened in that 5-year period. And another fun fact, the Demo 1 mission, which was of course the mission without a crew for that very first test of the Dragon and docking to the space station, that was when Anne McClain was on board for her first mission in 2019. So she played a very crucial role of getting in Dragon and doing all of those checkouts after that vehicle had docked to the space station. So pretty cool full circle story here of Anne being up there for that first uncrewed mission, and now in Crew-10, the 11th crewed mission in the last 5 years. So pretty impressive.
How about that? She saw the first Dragon come up, and now she's on board the 11th. And for you too, right there at the beginning, you know, we're on our 10th operational mission, as you mentioned, and now when you look back, you think about just being right there at the beginning of the commercial crew program when that Dragon docked at the ISS. It was really exciting for, you know, the entire country was so thrilled to have the ability to fly to space from American soil again.
Yeah, it was really wonderful to resume that aptitude to send rockets and with crew members on board from American soil again from here in Florida, and of course still trading off regularly with our Russian counterparts with Soyuz flights. So we're still continuing to fly American astronauts on the Soyuz, and as you see, we have a Russian cosmonaut on the Dragon today. So really nice that we maintain this spirit of international cooperation on board the International Space Station. Especially, as we said, with that 50th anniversary of Apollo Soyuz coming up in July. Another spectacular view. I think it's going to be a very beautiful launch day for all the people on the ground here in Florida.
Absolutely, we are headed in that direction. And hopefully so with the weather, because the weather gets a little iffy once we get into the weekend. So this is a prime opportunity to go.
Just like that prime number 73 for Expedition 73.
That's right. Let's grab another quick social question, Jessica. We're with Jessica Meir, NASA astronaut. Mohammed Therick asks, apologies if I didn't get your name correctly, what lessons from the Crew-10 mission will influence future astronaut rescue and contingency planning for the ISS and beyond?
You know, I think for that one, there isn't really
And this is Launch
something...
Control on countdown. For crew awareness, we'll be commencing with fuel bleed in approximately 2 minutes. Expect some pressing and venting from the vehicle.
And we can see the venting and that fuel bleed that's happening right now as it comes off the transporter erector. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit earlier about how whatever vehicle you launch on, that vehicle remains docked to the International Space Station as your lifeboat, essentially as your rescue vehicle. Even though you launch and you're not going to land for 6 months or more, you have that vehicle there at all times in case anything happens on the space station, anything happens to a crew member, though we needed to get the crew home safely. So we always have that rescue capability. From time to time, as you've seen in the last few years, we do have various situations emerge. If there's a technical issue on a certain vehicle, for example. And so we do what we do best here at NASA, and that is adapt and reevaluate and replan. And to me, that has always been the most impressive thing of working at NASA. When I am most impressed about NASA, it's when we have these challenges, because you see NASA rise to the occasion and do what we do best. Readapt and be flexible. And that's the same thing for all of these rescue missions. You know, we will replan and do whatever we need to do.
Good afternoon. You're watching live launch coverage of NASA and SpaceX's 10th rotational flight to the International Space Station. I'm NASA's Daryl Nail, and with us again today is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. It's great to have you back again.
Thanks, Daryl. It is wonderful to be here. Sending your friends and colleagues up to space is always the best thing that you can do as an astronaut here on the ground. So I'm so excited to be here playing a role in all of it.
And a big reason that you're here, to see your good friend Ann McClain off to space. Liftoff for her and the rest of the crew is at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time from here at Launchpad 39A. But before we continue our coverage, a quick reminder about Jessica's experience in space. Take a look back to 2019. Jessica Meir and Christina Cook made history with the first all-women spacewalk, the 221st for space station assembly. 2 years later, Jessica served as astronaut support person for Crew-10, or Crew-2 rather. There you see her, number 38, helping the team all the way to the pad. Then she went over to pad 39B, where she rehearsed with the Artemis II crew. A great time with the astronauts was had, but this time, this crew was practicing to go to the moon.
You know, I really like this video because it shows the enthusiasm that we all bring to the roles, whether it's a support role or whether it's a crew itself. You know, there is nothing better than sending your friends off to space, as I just said. So one of the most interesting things about our job as astronauts is doing different things all the time. It is an incredible time to be an astronaut right now, where we have so many different vehicles we can launch on. The Soyuz, like I launched on, the SpaceX Dragon that you're watching here today. Soon, hopefully, coming up next year, the Artemis II vehicle will launch and send our first astronauts to an orbit around the moon. So it's a very exciting time for us.
We certainly have a lot to look forward here on the Space Coast and for the United States space program. Some background, though, on today's launch attempt. It is the second launch attempt for Crew-10. On Wednesday, NASA and SpaceX stood down from the first attempt after teams discovered a suspected pocket of air trapped in the ground support hydraulic system used for the clamp arm that you can see there on your screen. It is wrapped around the Falcon 9 rocket and holds it to the launch arm. Yesterday, ground support teams successfully flushed that hydraulic system, and now it is ready to go for today's launch. The crew had a little bit of break while they worked on that.
Yeah, they did. The crew was able to relax yesterday. I think it was a very fortuitous opportunity because, you know, the day before you launch, they're still probably doing all of these things that are giving them a little bit of stress, dealing with last-minute issues. And then yesterday, they had already done all those things for the previous launch. So they had yesterday to really relax and then just a chance to be outside at the beach house and just take it all in, appreciate some of the sights and sounds and feels of the Earth before they go to their new home on the ISS.
Crew-10 will be launching from pad 39A that you see there. Big props to our flight operations crew right here at the Kennedy Space Center for those beautiful views. You see the helicopter on the left part of your screen orbiting around the pad, going in circles, and appropriately so, here on Pi Day. Once the crew... Sorry?
I'm sure making Anne McLean feel right at home, too, the sweet sounds of the helicopter in the distance.
Absolutely. A helicopter pilot herself, and all of them pilots inside the capsule today. In a little over an hour, this spacecraft and rocket will lift off. So let's take you through the rest of their launch day previously leading up to this moment. After waking up and having a bite to eat, SpaceX helped Crew-10 into their suits, as you can see here inside the historic crew quarters suit-up room. They also played a card game, a tradition to use to get their bad luck out of there, losing for the commander and the chief winning. Then we saw them walk out, Crew-10 waving, taking the same footsteps as every NASA astronaut since Apollo 7 in 1968, walking out, greeting the crowd, getting into their vehicles, and then joining a security-escorted caravan for a 20-minute ride to launch pad 39A. And then there they are, looking up and looking out as they walk down the crew access arm into their spacecraft on top of the rocket, and now they are locked and loaded inside the spacecraft. And we are watching them live while they await the next big milestones, the fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket and the arming of the launch escape system. Throughout this broadcast, we've been taking your questions from social media, so keep sending them. Hashtag AskNASA on NASA's YouTube, Facebook, X, and Twitch platforms. Also, for those of you watching on NASA's YouTube channel right now, a reminder to make sure you refresh your player or browser to join our live chat. Now, at this time, we are expanding our coverage and would like to welcome SpaceX and NASA commentators joining us live from Hawthorne, California, where the SpaceX mission team is located. And a great good afternoon and welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Daryl. I'm Jessie Anderson, a Senior Production Engineering Manager here at SpaceX.
And I'm Anna Schneider with NASA Communications. We are excited to be joining you once again from Mission Control here in Hawthorne as we count down to liftoff of Crew-10 just over an hour from now. Of course, Crew-10 is our 10th operational mission with SpaceX, flying astronauts for long-duration missions to the International Space Station. Crew-10 will have 2 first-time flyers on board, as well as a veteran NASA astronaut and a veteran Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA astronaut. And the multinational crew represents 3 different space agencies, with NASA, JAXA, and Roscosmos all represented.
Today's crew will fly aboard the Dragon spacecraft named Endurance, which previously flew the Crew-3, Crew-5, and Crew-7 missions. Overall, this will be Dragon's 46th visit to the space station and its 14th human spaceflight mission to the orbiting lab, which includes NASA's Commercial Crew Program missions and private astronaut missions with Axiom Space. We're also celebrating the 23rd anniversary of the founding of SpaceX today on March 14th, which also is Pi Day, a celebration of the mathematical constant pi.
Now, over the last 3+ hours, Crew-10 has been going through the detailed process of getting ready for their mission to the International Space Station. So let's go ahead and take a moment to introduce you to the crew. In the commander's seat is NASA astronaut Anne McLean. She's making her second trip to low Earth orbit. The Spokane, Washington native and U.S. Army colonel was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013 and has spent a total of 204 days in space, completing 2 spacewalks totaling 13 hours and 8 minutes outside of the orbiting laboratory. Next to McLean in the pilot seat is Nicole Ayers, who was selected as a NASA astronaut in 2021. The Colorado native graduated from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs and is a major in the U.S. Air Force, and this will be the first spaceflight for Ayers. Serving as a mission specialist is JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, and today's flight will mark Onishi's second trip to the space station. He was selected as an astronaut by JAXA in 2009 and has logged 113 days in space previously. To round it all out, the final mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, and he was selected as a cosmonaut in 2018 and will also be making his first spaceflight today. Once on board the International Space Station, Crew-10 will briefly become members of Expedition 72 and then Expedition 73 in April. They will conduct space station maintenance and scientific research to understand material flammability, contributing to future spacecraft design and study how spaceflight affects human physiology and psychology. The crew will also engage with students worldwide via ham radio and use its existing hardware with newly integrated software to test a backup lunar navigation solution.
To date, SpaceX has flown 56 crew members to space since the Demo 2 mission in May of 2020, which was almost 5 years ago. Coming up here at T-minus 45 minutes, we'll be listening in for the team to report their readiness for propellant load with a final go, no-go poll. And so far, today continues to be a smooth countdown, and we're looking good for an on-time liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 39A in Florida. Now, here on the ground, the teams will be staffed around the clock in mission control just behind us to monitor Dragon and the mission, and not just for today, but throughout the entire mission, from liftoff to the Crew-10's arrival at the space station, all the way through splashdown when the astronauts return back home. And on console or headset in mission control, which you can see there on your screen, there are 6 key positions. The mission director is in charge of the room and tasked with making real-time decisions to ensure mission success. The person that you may hear talking to the astronauts is the crew operations and resources engineer. You'll hear us refer to them as the core throughout the broadcast. And there are 4 additional team members focused on vehicle systems, including avionics, navigation and control, software, propulsion, life support, and communication with ground support teams. Now, apart from mission control, our Falcon 9 team...
Dragon SpaceX, cycling orbit tank isolation valves to equalize low flow pressure. Additionally, I can give you a go to step into Section 5. When ready, report go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, copy Section 5 and work.
Just pausing for some comms between the core and Crew-10. Now, apart from mission control, our Falcon 9 team is currently located in the Launch and Landing Control Center at Hangar X. And we are now less than an hour until launch, and they are settling in for final checkouts, propellant loading, and getting ready for launch itself.
Yep, and NASA has its very own set of team members at NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas, who have been preparing the International Space Station for Dragon's arrival. The teams in Mission Control Houston recently gave their go for launch, confirming that the station is ready to receive Dragon and the new crew. Following liftoff, today's flight to the space station will take about 28 hours, with Dragon flying autonomously the entire way. Docking is targeted for 11:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Pacific, tomorrow, March 15th. And just like autopilot on a commercial aircraft, the crew always has the ability to take manual control of the spacecraft if needed.
And before all of that happens, as the booster returns to the launch site and slows down from supersonic speeds, people in the immediate area may hear a brief double clap of a thunder-like sound known as a sonic boom.
Similar sonic booms like this were heard during the return and landing of the space shuttle, and sonic booms like these are one of the hallmarks of reusable systems like Falcon.
Here's what some of these booster returns have looked and sounded like on previous missions.
I know a lot of people will be excited when they hear the sonic boom.
And these are going to provide quite a show because you're going to hear the sonic booms.
That sonic boom is great for us.
That thunderclap broke the sound barrier.
Side booster separation confirmed.
Just heard the 2 sonic booms
astronauts here in the room.
Booster landing confirmed.
We are now at T-minus 57 minutes and counting to today's launch. While we wait, let's check in with NASA's Gary Jordan at Johnson Space Center to see how things are shaping up at Mission Control in Houston. Gary, how's it going?
Hey, Jesse. Hey, Anna. Thanks for having me. Welcome again to Mission Control here in the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We're the hub of human spaceflight at NASA, and the team here is poised for launch and preparing for the crew to lift off and begin their journey to the orbiting laboratory. In the home stretch of rendezvous, NASA and SpaceX flight controllers will enter into what's called integrated operations. Both flight control teams will conduct a series of go, no-go polls for Dragon Endurance's docking to the International Space Station. Rotation missions like Crew-10 help NASA continue to maximize the important research and technology demonstrations made possible only in the International Space Station's unique microgravity environment. The space station is critical for NASA to prepare for future commercial low Earth orbit destinations and to understand and overcome the challenges of long-duration spaceflight necessary for a long-term presence on the Moon and crewed missions deeper into the solar system, including Mars. Now here's a closer look at the mission and what Crew-10 will have to look forward to during their stay aboard the International Space Station.
The Crew-10 mission is going to be a rotational mission to the International Space Station.
So we will launch aboard the SpaceX Dragon capsule and the Falcon 9 rocket.
I'm just enjoying the way towards the launch. Of course, I'm looking forward for the day of launch.
And we are going to stay there about a half a year.
So the first goal of Crew-10 is to continue learning about the Dragon and the Falcon 9 rocket that we're going to be flying on to enable SpaceX to continue their development of rockets and even private astronaut missions in the future. The other mission is to get us safely to the International Space Station so that we can crew this incredible national orbiting laboratory that we have and continue the science experiments that we have ongoing there.
One of the unique characteristics of the International Space Station is microgravity.
We get to learn how humans and plants and other types of hardware react in the space environment and the microgravity environment.
And it helps us to develop all kinds of new materials, medicines, and it helps us to push our knowledge forward.
The discoveries that we make on board the International Space Station then inform what we do on Earth, and it allows us to further both humankind here on Earth and get to further places in the universe.
So I've often been asked why we explore, and I think it's different for everybody.
When people are born, they naturally want to explore their environment, first as babies, and then as kids, and finally as adults. That's how we expand our world, and that's how we find something new.
Every time that we make a further step, we learn something and we learn how to adapt, and that is so important to humanity.
This is probably the main things which drives us forward and helps us to survive as a species.
There are so many unknowns in space, and as explorers and as humans, we want to find out what's in that unknown. For me, it's the fact that I get to be a small piece of figuring out what the unknown is and taking that next step to get to the Moon and to Mars and the Artemis program.
Our ultimate goal is to go to Mars, but it's not an easy journey, and when we face a new challenge, we must solve it step by step.
I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the International Space Station. We're outside of the atmosphere, and now we don't have the protection of the atmosphere. What happens, and how do we better prepare our people, our hardware, our food, our water systems for that deep space exploration? It's really important on the space station that we learn those lessons now when we're in low Earth orbit. That way we know what we need to bring with us when we go onto the Moon with the Artemis program.
One of the things that we do on the International Space Station is work with our international partners all across the world.
I think it's hard to overestimate the value of international cooperation in space exploration because we all know that it takes much time and effort.
Space is hard, it's very challenging, and it's sometimes unpredictable, and that's why I think cooperation is the key to success.
The International Space Station wouldn't be international without all of our partners.
And our goal is to be a beacon of hope for all of humankind so that people can look and say, this is what we can accomplish when we work together.
T-minus 52 minutes and counting. We just pulled go for NASA and SpaceX to begin propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes. A great update there to our milestones. We now have NASA's Megan Cruz live from a nearby launch viewing location here at Kennedy Space Center. Megan.
Hey, yeah, back here again today, and the weather is as beautiful as it was Wednesday, and the crowd as excited as ever to see liftoff in less than an hour. Now, we again want to bring in Mike Ravenscroft with NASA's Commercial Crew program. He's on console working the launch today over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Mike, great to have you back.
Hi, Megan. Happy to be here.
All right. So again, thanks for stepping off console. When we spoke during Wednesday's launch attempt, there was a ground hydraulics issue. What was done to resolve that to get us to launch today?
Yeah, Megan. So the team worked really hard on Wednesday during that first attempt to resolve the issue. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get there. So the teams, the SpaceX and NASA team, met Wednesday evening, Wednesday night, and developed a troubleshooting plan to go ahead and restore this system back to operational. So we went ahead and met, and Thursday they went off and executed that plan. They went ahead and opened up some of the valves, did some inspections, opened up some of the valves, and went ahead and bled the system. And then they did perform checkouts and performed the checkouts, and the system was nominal at that point. So we got back here today on launch countdown and, did some additional checkouts, normal checkouts that are performed on day of launch, and everything's checking out good.
That's wonderful to hear. And it's always great to see teams coming together to resolve issues to get us to launch. Now, as CCP's Launch Vehicle Systems Office Manager, you were also part of keeping an eye on today's booster, correct? Which is flying for its second time.
Yeah, Megan. So we watched that booster from the beginning when it's starting to be built, the whole way through production, the whole way through all the testing that's performed, even before it's getting that first launch, which occurred in December for the Empower-E mission. So we track all that, track all the issues that come out from all that in the first flight, and we review all that data. And then when it goes into maintenance for our flight, we are tracking all that work along with SpaceX and ensuring that the vehicle is ready for day of launch and a safe flight for the crew to the ISS.
And Mike, last question for you. How do you feel just being a part of NASA's Commercial Crew program?
This is awesome. I can't imagine myself anywhere else. This program, I've been here for quite a while, and this is a family. You get to work with folks from all over the country, from California to Texas to Alabama to here in Florida, and it's just a family, and that's how we feel about each other. We work hard. We get to work with a lot of great contractors, and so day in and day out, you get to show up for work and enjoy what you do.
Yeah, and do amazing things together. Mike, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Megan. Appreciate it.
All right, let's get back over now to Anna and Jesse in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Megan. Falcon 9 is the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Together, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy have completed more than 450 launches and over 380 reflights.
And today, the booster will be attempting to land at Landing Zone 1, which is just down the coast from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This will be the second flight of the first stage booster supporting the Crew-10 mission.
Rapid reusability drastically reduces launch costs, helps increase launch frequency, and enables a wide array of new government, commercial, and scientific opportunities in space. Lowering the cost of access to space is helping take humanity's next steps into the solar system, whether in low Earth orbit, interplanetary, or even deep space. And when costs are lower, government and commercial customers can launch more missions, which helps accelerate development. This also helps commercial satellite and private research customers afford to launch more projects to space, which helps stimulate innovation here on Earth. All of this to say, reusability is the key innovation that is making space more accessible for the industry as a whole. And just like the first stage of Falcon 9, Dragon is also reusable.
The reusable Dragon spacecraft has flown people to the International Space Station 13 times. And as we mentioned earlier, today's crew will fly aboard the same Dragon that previously flew the Crew-3, Crew-5, and Crew-7 missions.
But back to today's mission. We are coming up on T-minus 48 minutes to launch, and our teams are carefully moving through the pre-flight process. Now, a lot of preparations have brought us to this point, including a dry dress rehearsal, static fire on Sunday, and an initial launch attempt on Wednesday. Now, we did stand down from that attempt due to a hydraulic system issue, but the teams completed inspections of the ground support hydraulic system used for the clamp arm supporting the Falcon 9 rocket and successfully flushed a suspected pocket of trapped air in the system.
Now, all of that hard work brings us to today's launch, and next up in our
the team has pulled go for LES arm, propellant load, and launch.
And there, you just heard that the team had pulled go for both prop load and for launch. So that was the next step in the countdown that we were waiting for, and that was from the SpaceX launch director, and they were calling up to the crew to let them know that we had received that go to continue with that prop load. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the Dragon launch team, as well as key NASA launch members, are in the Launch and Landing Control Center at SpaceX's Hangar X in Florida. And the launch director will also check in with the Dragon mission director, referred to as the MD, and the NASA launch manager to make sure everyone is on the same page and everyone is ready to move forward. Again, there's a lot of teams and a lot of moving parts to getting a launch off the ground. And so leading up to the final stages of launch today, you will hear various check-ins on that process. So right now, there on your screen, you can see Crew-10. They are on board Dragon, waiting to get the green light to stow the crew arm for the launch and arm the launch escape system. And we did just hear that go, so we should start getting a good view of that access arm moving away from the spacecraft pretty soon. Now, on the range side of things, the range continues to be go for launch, monitoring the clearance area surrounding our launch pad, as well as the air and sea space along the flight corridor.
And as you can see in your on the left-hand corner of your screen, the weather is looking great for today's launch. Overall, weather is trending in the right direction, and we currently have less than a 5% chance of violation at our target liftoff time today, which is great. Our teams will continue to keep an eye on the weather, but we'll have a final pre-fueling weather briefing in about 20 seconds from now at the T-minus 45 minute mark. Now, weather is forecasted to be excellent on the Space Coast heading into today's launch opportunity. And again, the current forecast is greater than 95% chance of acceptable conditions at launch. Now, weather along the Atlantic
T-minus
coast...
45 minutes. Both control rooms go into lockdown and remain in that state until the launch escape system is disarmed. All operators are to remain at their console and maintain a sterile cockpit until MD confirms successful disarming of the launch escape system following orbit insertion or propellant offload in the event of a scrub. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and then approve aborting the countdown. Per urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Crew X's arm retraction starting.
And that was the launch director performing a briefing with the crew. Sounds like everything is go for launch, and we're going to start seeing that crew access arm moving away from the vehicle here shortly.
We should also see propellant load getting underway in just a few minutes as well. Again, our teams are staffed around the clock in Mission Control here in Hawthorne, Mission Control in Houston, as well as the Launch Control Center to monitor Dragon throughout its entire mission from liftoff all the way to Crew-10's arrival at the space station and then on its return home to Earth. And there you're seeing some great shots of the crew access arm pulling away from Dragon. Clear skies as far as the eye can see. Perfect weather for today's launch.
Getting exciting over here. Yeah, weather looks amazing over there at pad 39A. You can see that crew access arm still moving. It'll move all the way to that 90 degrees away from the vehicle.
Crew access arm retraction complete.
And there we just heard confirmation that the crew access arm has been fully retracted. That process is now complete. Again, the next step in our process leading up to today's launch at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific will be the propellant loading, and that should be getting underway here shortly. In the meantime, let's go ahead and check back in with Daryl at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
All right, thank you very much, ladies. Back here with NASA astronaut Jessica Meir as we orbit the launch pad, Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center, going in circles on Pi Day. Seems fitting, Jessica.
Absolutely, it does. This is the day for it.
We've got a few milestones coming up here in the next few minutes. We're going to close our visors at T-minus 39 minutes and then start the process of getting that launch escape system armed. As we just saw, the crew access arm has moved away, so if there were to be an emergency, going through the crew access arm is one option up until the point in which the launch escape system is armed, and then it's off the top of the rocket.
Yeah, that's right. That launch escape arm could actually swing back in just about 30 seconds, and during that time, the crew would actually be unbuckling their seatbelts and getting ready to egress, so that timing would work out.
Visors closed, arming the launch escape system.
Copy, Dragon. You are go for 6.6 arm launch escape.
Running these milestones early at this point, which is a good thing. We heard Commander...
Launch escape system is verified armed.
There we have the verification that the launch escape system is armed. A high energy system that could be very much needed in case something were to happen to the rocket.
Yeah, that's something that the astronauts on board can actually hear. They can hear it being armed. They get this sort of loud thump that they hear. And of course, that launch escape system, it consists of 8 Super Draco thrusters. It's only used for an abort in this case. And it's armed 2 minutes before the loading of the fuel.
And I'm wondering about your thoughts in this moment as you hear Commander Ann McClain get these systems ready. Your friend, your fellow classmate, getting ready to go.
Yeah, I think things are getting very real right now. It's really interesting on launch day. You know, I know from my own experience, sometimes you actually have to remind yourself that it's actually launch day because you have been through this whole series of readiness and all of these checks and all the comm checks and all the physical actions so many times in various simulations. I remember on my launch, I really did have to remind myself, I'm looking at my monitor, I'm going through all of these different cues and the procedures, but then I would hear something, maybe the groan of the fuel in the lines or a slight movement of the rocket, and that was what made me realize, oh, wait a minute. At the end of this one, I'm not going to be going home and going to dinner. I will be in space. So perhaps that realization is kind of setting in for these 3 astronauts and cosmonaut. I'm sure it's a little bit different for Ann and Tak, who have gone through a launch before. Totally new for Nicole and Kirill. So a really nice blend of experience in that Dragon capsule today.
And a beautiful scene outside as we head towards sunset. We'll be lifting off just before then at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Sunset right around 7:30. It should make for a beautiful launch for those who are gathered in the area to watch. The sky will become lit up as the sun dances with the exhaust from the Falcon 9 rocket.
These launch escape systems that we're talking about are, of course, a vital component of any vehicle that contains astronauts on board. And it's something that we hope, of course, to never have to use. But the few times historically when we have had to use them also provide such a testament, such a great test of that system. I remember very well Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin's abort on the Soyuz that happened in 2018. I was in training at the time in Star City, and that abort happened when they were at about 30 miles up, and they ended up going up to about 50 miles and then landing safely due to the very reliable, highly functioning abort system. Search and rescue teams were there to pull them out in about 10 minutes. And a really stressful day, of course, for everybody.
And thankfully venting for propellant load.
That was a stressful day for everybody on board and everybody on the ground, but again, a really nice test to see that these systems are in place for a reason and they do work.
Nick Hague went to space that day and came right back. And fortunately, everything went well, and he was able to return to the ISS, and he's up there now.
Yeah, he's up there right now waiting for this mission to join him. I know that he's very much looking forward to giving Anne and her crew a big high five, especially for those 8-ball classmates, but really for everybody on board. We joke in our class that, Nick launched 2.5 times so far for his 2 missions to space, but he's got a little bit of extra experience.
We have learned so much during your time here, Jessica, spending it with us, giving us your insight and talking about your experiences in space flight. We appreciate it deeply. Also, the audience appreciates it as they continue to ask questions on NASA's social media channels, #AskNASA, Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and X. Dolores Kiefer asks now, can the ground crew talk to the astronauts during fueling?
Yeah, they can. We just heard a call go, and those comm loops are open. Of course, we can talk to the crew if in case of any type of emergency or any type of information that they need. We have those comm loops open. Interestingly, speaking about that, the crew can actually hear the fueling process. So they can hear the valves, they can hear the flow of the fuel as well. So interesting for them to be following along with the process.
Can hear it, see it, and feel it. Just a few seconds now before we start propellant load for the Falcon 9 rocket.
The launch auto sequence has started.
And here we go. Tanks are being filled. Prop load is underway. A very dynamic time for the astronauts and the ground crews. For this countdown today, we got a little further and have gone further than our attempt on Wednesday, which stopped at T-minus 43 minutes. We are now T-minus 34 minutes, and everything is looking good. The vehicle is go, spacecraft is go, ground teams are go, and now we are tanking this rocket.
So this crew is hearing those sounds. As we mentioned, they can hear the fuel flowing through the valves and flowing through the pipelines. And this is a rocket-grade kerosene called RP1 and also liquid oxygen. That is the fuel for this powerful Falcon 9 rocket today.
1.8 million pounds of thrust once the rocket takes off. Thanks to our Kennedy Space Center flight operations team for these beautiful helicopter shots. Doing a great job. Let's go back now to Hawthorne, California, and join our commentators there.
We are at T-minus 33 minutes from launch and getting closer and closer to launching Crew-10 into space. After the long-duration mission is complete, Crew-10 will be the first NASA commercial crew mission to target a return splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. NASA and SpaceX have been working together toward certification and readiness for Dragon recoveries on the West Coast. Since 2019, Dragon recoveries have primarily occurred off the coast of Florida. SpaceX is moving Dragon recovery operations to off the coast of California to allow Dragon to complete its deorbit before safely jettisoning the trunk over the Pacific Ocean, comparable to the first 21 Dragon missions. Crew splashdown locations are near Los Angeles, Oceanside, and San Diego. The recovery vessel Shannon will be stationed in Long Beach, California, to support the new operations. And to establish this capability that improves public safety, NASA and SpaceX worked for months establishing new sites, obtaining regulatory approvals, performing engine assignments and software changes, as well as tabletop exercises and flight rule updates.
It'll be really exciting to see Crew-10 come home after they're done with their long-duration mission. But Crew-9, who Crew-10 will be handing over once they get docked to the space station, will, of course, still splash down off the coast of Florida in a few days. But back to today's mission, let's go ahead and learn more from the astronauts flying today.
You know, I often get asked why we explore. Some people explore because it's exciting to ride on a rocket. They like the boom, they like the flying, they like the electronics, they like to go fast. Some people want to explore to answer questions about the context in which the Earth exists. How old are we? How many galaxies are there? How big are we? Are we like a speck of dust on somebody's sleeve, or are we the biggest thing going out there in the universe?
Curiosity is like the main power that moves us forward. Space exploration is important to satisfy this curiosity.
As we go on to the moon and Mars and look at what those planetary bodies are made of, we can learn a lot about the Earth itself and how to better humankind.
I think it's important for us as a species to expand our boundaries, because that's how we advance our technologies and civilization.
We have to continue to explore, continue to push the boundaries. And I think really throughout the history of humankind, we've always explored. And so when people ask why we explore, I would like to ask back, what type of society would we be if we lost that curiosity? Is that somewhere that we'd want to live?
Space Center in Florida, I'm Daryl Nail, joined by NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. So good to have you here. Here's more about the crew that's going into space today. I'm Daryl Nail with NASA. Welcome back to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, here with NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. Here's more about the crew that's going into space today. NASA astronaut Anne McClain, she is your Crew-10 commander, making her second trip to low Earth orbit. The Spokane, Washington native and U.S. Army colonel was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013 and has spent a total of 204 days in space and completed 2 spacewalks totaling 13 hours and 8 minutes. She's very competent and, as you've described, a very excellent leader.
Absolutely, a natural leader, and it is so thrilling to be here watching her do what she was born to do and leading this crew to space today. Sitting next to her is the pilot for Crew-10, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. She was selected as a NASA astronaut in 2021. The Colorado native graduated from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs and is a major in the U.S. Air Force. This is her first space flight, and she's pretty excited about it.
Absolutely.
Takuya Onishi. He is the JAXA astronaut, serving as a mission specialist. Today's flight will mark Onishi's second trip to the space station. He was selected as an astronaut by Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency in 2009 and has logged 113 days in space, and he will eventually be the station commander.
Yeah, that will be a very nice moment to see as Anne hands over those leadership reins over to Tak. Transfer of controls from her as the commander of the SpaceX vehicle over to Tak to be commander of the space station. So
great opportunity for leadership for both of these experienced crew members.
And the second mission specialist is Kirill Peskov. The Roscosmos cosmonaut was selected as a cosmonaut in 2018 and will be also making his first spaceflight today.
This is really the ultimate of Kirill's very curious and adventurous nature. I hear he loves to discover all aspects of and areas of Russia and the U.S. now in his SUV, and he is always exploring, so this will be the ultimate of his exploration today for him and for all of his crew.
And all 4 of these crew members are pilots. They speak that common language of aviation. That must be comforting to all of them.
I think so, and I think it has brought them closer together as a crew. They can almost read each other's minds, they say. Sometimes, they don't even need words, and they have this shared sentiment, this shared language. It makes them a very synchronous, cohesive crew.
And for the past year and a half, that crew has been training diligently to be ready to help conduct science investigations aboard station. The crew will perform biomedical research and technology demonstrations over the 4-month expedition. Commander Anne McLean is participating in the Canadian Space Agency space experiment involving heart health.
This headband is actually connected to sensors throughout my body, and they are collecting real-time data on my heart rate, oxygen saturation, and my respiratory rate. Imagine the day where you go see your doctor because you're concerned about your heart health, and they give you these sensors to wear, and they get this massive, comprehensive look at your cardiovascular health over multiple days doing multiple activities.
Another science investigation on board involves tiny materials inspired by our own DNA that could help be used here on Earth with those people who suffer from arthritis in their knees. Let's go back now to Megan Cruz, who is standing by with NASA Acting Administrator Janet Petro.
Yeah, that's right. Acting administrator since January. And then, of course, before that, center director here at Kennedy since 2021. And how does it feel to be back here to watch another crew launch?
Oh, my God. I can't, Megan, tell you how excited I am to be here. And I was here the whole week. We had unfortunately had the scrub on Wednesday. But I cannot explain the feeling of coming back home. Oh. I love this center. I love this workforce. I love the mission that we have here at the center. So it was very exciting. In D.C., it's not my normal job jar down here at the Kennedy Space Center being center director where, I had the workforce and the mission. So I'm super excited to be back here and to be able to witness this launch later tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Launch is going to happen here shortly. I know we've been talking about this a lot in the broadcast that every single member of Crew-10 is a pilot. Yes, actually. A pilot, as are you. Did you get to talk to the crew? I see that they've signed your hat.
I absolutely did. So I got to see them a couple times. So when they landed at the landing facility here, I got to see them and greet them. And that's where they gave me this hat,
that's
which
amazing.
Is so cool. I've never gotten a present from a crew before. So Crew-10, hats off to them for giving me, and they did sign it. And then on Tuesday, we got to go what's called Behind the Glass tour and talk to them. They're behind a glass because they're in quarantine, and we got to talk to them and ask them questions and talk to them and just see how they were doing. And so that's pretty special. So I got to talk to all of them, all of those pilots there, and they are super excited, ready to go.
Yeah, and speaking of excited, we have NASA astronauts Sunny Williams, Butch Wilmore, Nick Hague, plus Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. They're going to come back shortly after Crew-10 arrives on station. During a live press conference from station recently, Butch and Sunny said they're going to miss space.
Absolutely, because you got to think about the astronauts. And by the way, last week from Johnson Space Center's Mission Control, I did get to talk to Butch, Sunny, Nick, and a little bit to Don Pettit there. So I got to talk to them as well. But you got to figure they, to be selected and trained and the passion that they have to go to space, for them, it's got to be, this is what they do for a living. Mm-hmm. This is what they're going to do. And in fact, I would bet they might have some mixed emotions for leaving because, every time you get to go to space, which is what all astronauts want to do, you never know. It might be your last time because you might not be selected for another mission or whatever. So I bet they have mixed emotions leaving their colleagues up there at the space station. I'm sure they're anxious to get home and put their feet on Earth and spend time with their family, but I think that they have enjoyed their time in space. When I said Behind the Glass to Butch and Sonny a while ago. I asked them, and they had told me that they hope they get to stay a little bit longer than 8 days in space. That was at their behind the glass. And I don't know if they meant to stay as long as they got to, but I know that they are a valued member of this expedition crew, and they've done amazing research. They've done spacewalks together. I think Sonny now holds a record for the most amount of time in the vacuum of space. So they have to be very, very proud of what they've accomplished. They were very much integrated as a crew and did a lot of work on the station, research and science experiments. And so, I think they're going to miss space. I think so.
Well, Janet, no mixed emotions here. It was great seeing you. I'm going to put this in a jar of memories of today because this was wonderful, and we're about to see launch.
All right.
Great
Thank you,
here,
Megan.
Janet.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. We'll send it back to Daryl and Jessica.
All right, thank you both. And just behind them, as you saw in that shot, was the Vehicle Assembly Building, a very iconic building here at NASA, where we recently reached a major milestone in NASA's Artemis program. That's, of course, preparing for the first crewed mission around the moon in over 50 years. Engineers finished stacking the twin solid rocket boosters for Artemis 2. These 177-foot tall boosters will provide most of the 8.8 million pounds of thrust needed to launch 4 astronauts on a 10-day lunar journey. There's a shot of the core stage, which they're starting to work on now. Since November, crews have used a massive crane to lift and assemble those booster segments. They're each packed with avionics and motors that will safely detach after launch. Now, with the completion of that, they're going to focus on the SLS. Artemis 2 will carry NASA astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, and Christina Cook, along with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, on a mission around the moon. So here's Jeremy now with a little more about that.
Hey everyone, I'm Canadian Space Agency astronaut Colonel Jeremy Hansen, mission specialist for the Artemis 2 mission. I'm here at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas, where we normally do most of our training. But every once in a while, we like to change it up a bit. Reed, Victor, Christine, and I recently spent several days in Iceland trading in our spacesuits for hiking gear to study its geology and surroundings. Why Iceland? Well, as you can see, it has a similar landscape and terrain to the moon, with various volcanic rocks like basalts and breccias, and has limited to no vegetation. The Nordic island has been a lunar training site for NASA astronauts since the days of the Apollo missions. My crewmates and I teamed up with scientists and geology experts to explore the huge boulders, formations, and volcanic craters across the lava fields. During our journey, we stopped at various spots to discuss what we observed.
Some of the really fine material is compacting into what's like the glue holding this together.
And even tested different types of tools to collect rock samples. Although we won't be landing on the moon during our mission, this field work and navigation practice will allow us to make informed observations when passing the lunar surface and pave the way for future Artemis crew training. And that's your Artemis Moon Minute.
For more Artemis updates, scan the QR code on your screen right now, or visit nasa.gov/Artemis-Roman numeral 2 or II. You don't have to worry about getting updates there, though, because, Jessica, you are friends and former classmates with both Victor Glover and Christina Cook.
Yeah, that's right. They are my astronaut classmates like brothers and sisters, and it has been so exciting to see this Artemis journey. I was here for the Artemis 1 launch, and that just made it all so real. We saw the hardware, we saw the vehicle, we saw the launch, and we knew that the next time that vehicle launched, it would be with my friends and colleagues on board. So it was an incredibly exciting moment for all of us as astronauts.
That launch coming in February of 2025, currently scheduled on the calendar. Let's go back now to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Daryl. As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be taking Crew-10 to the International Space Station today. Falcon 9 is a two-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. It's also the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. And sitting at the top of Falcon 9, Dragon and its trunk stand over 26 feet tall. There are 2 windows on the spacecraft, plus one underneath the nose cone. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect with the space station. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight, and the trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo. Now, Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew to and from the space station. There are currently 4 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions that have docked to the station. There you can see them on your screen. That is Endeavour, Resilience, Endurance, and Freedom. Now, designed to be the safest spacecraft ever flown, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond.
And Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit. Dragon has flown 49 times, with 15 human spaceflight missions since 2020, when Dragon became the first private spacecraft to take humans to the International Space Station. In that time, Dragon has flown over 1,000 experiments to space and 56 crew members representing 14 different countries.
Dragon has proven to be a versatile spacecraft. It can autonomously dock to the space station when outfitted with the International Space Station docking adapter, as it is for today's flight. When it's not going to the space station and in free flyer mode, the docking adapter can be swapped out for a cupola. Another option that we have is the Skywalker hardware, which supports extravehicular activities as the crew used during the Polaris Dawn mission. Now, continuing down the vehicle, we do have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC engine, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. After stage separation, the MVAC will ignite and carry Dragon to its target orbit. Now, the Falcon 9's first and second stages are connected by the black inner stage, which houses the MVAC engine and the system that decouples the 2 stages during stage separation. And below that is the first stage.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
Good call out. Stage 2 LOX loading has begun. Below that is the first stage, which is powered by 9 Merlin engines. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift.
Dragon SpaceX reporting that we continue to track no issues with Dragon or Falcon proceeding to launch.
SpaceX Dragon, copy.
Great news, just calling out that we're tracking no issues. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift Falcon 9 off of the ground through the lower, thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Now, each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust.
And after stage separation, stage 1 will return to Earth for recovery and reuse on a future mission using a combination of the Merlin sea level engines and the 4 titanium grid fins located near the top of the booster, which will guide it during its re-entry and landing. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that deploy and allow for vertical landing on a drone ship or landing pad. Now, today we will be attempting to return the booster to land at landing zone 1. The second stage will power Dragon into its initial low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue its journey to the space station using its own thrusters. About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing the guidance navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station. With T0 coming up in just under 15 minutes, our teams are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready to go.
And we are still looking good for an on-time launch today. Both Dragon and Falcon 9 continue to be healthy. As we continue to listen and watch the countdown, our teams are preparing the vehicle for flight. Propellant loading of both RP-1 and liquid oxygen began at T-minus 35 minutes. And we also heard the call a few minutes ago that the launch escape system is armed. The launch escape system is designed to propel Dragon away from Falcon 9 in the event of an emergency during launch. Now, the range, which is monitoring the keep-out zones among other key flight requirements, also continues to report no issues, and they are go to support today's launch.
And weather also continues to look good. You can see it there on your screen, clear skies. And we are still tracking a roughly less than 5% chance of violation at our target liftoff time of 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. And as you heard earlier, we're continuing to be optimistic that we're going to maintain these good conditions into launch. And as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window driven by our planned rendezvous point, the point at which Dragon and station will meet in orbit. The station is orbiting the Earth at more than 17,000 miles per hour, and Dragon needs to catch up. That means we have to deliver Dragon to the correct orbit by timing its trajectory relative to the orbiting laboratory so that they are in the same place in orbit at the same time. So precise liftoff time is crucial for hitting that rendezvous point. And at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we would have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity, which is Saturday, March 15th at 6:41 p.m. Eastern, 3:41 p.m. Pacific. But again, everything and all the systems continue to be go. And for now, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Gary at the Johnson Space Center for a quick status update from Houston.
Hey, thank you, Anna. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, teams continue to work around the clock to monitor activities aboard the orbital outpost. Leading the teams inside the room is Flight Director T.J. Creamer. The team in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will track the autonomous docking of Dragon Endurance when they enter joint operations. This will happen when the spacecraft enters the approach ellipsoid, the invisible boundary stretching 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers that helps us monitor all arriving and departing spacecraft, is essentially the neighborhood of the space station. Once docked, crew members in both Dragon and aboard the station will perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the spacecraft's hatch for Crew-10 to float into the station and begin their stay. We anticipate that the hatch will be opened about an hour and a half after the docking. When they enter the orbital outpost, Crew-10 will be greeted by the rest of their Expedition 72 crew and will come together for opening remarks. That's all from us here in Mission Control as the anticipation continues to build for launch in under 20 minutes. How's it looking on the Space Coast, Daryl?
We're looking great, Gary. Looking fantastic. We've got fantastic weather, 95% go. You see the beautiful shot outside of the pad there, the rocket and the spacecraft. When it launches today, the crew aboard the ISS, the destination for today's launch, will be about 260 miles over top of the west coast of Australia. So too far to see the launch. It's nice to see a rocket go off when you're on the ISS, but unfortunately it won't be the case this time.
Oh, yeah. It is a wonderful thing to see when your crewmates are heading towards you. I remember a photograph that Christina Cook took of my Soyuz approaching the station, and one of these incredible opportunities that you could see the outline of the trajectory of the Soyuz as it approached, and it's such a beautiful image. It's a shame they won't be able to see it, but they will be so excited to have their crewmates come on board.
And we're about to hear from the crew here before launch. We'll hear from them after launch. It'll be special. They have some important things to say.
Oh, absolutely. I am very excited to hear these final thoughts coming from the entire crew right before launch.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll send it back to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Daryl. Our next major milestone on the countdown event will be around the T-minus 10-minute mark, which is just in about 5 seconds, when Falcon 9 launch commit criteria get checked by computers.
Dragon, SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, displays are configured for launch. And with that, this is the pilot, Nicole Ayers. And on behalf of Crew-10, we'd like to say that today we celebrate the countless individuals all over the world that have made this journey possible. To the engineers, instructors, flight controllers, scientists, and leaders who worked tirelessly to get us here, thank you for your dedication to the safety and success of this mission. And a special thank you to our friends and families for your unwavering love and support. This mission is a testament of what humans can achieve when we work together. Go Crew-10!
Such great words from the crew. Again, and some cheering going on. You can see that on your screen.
SpaceX copies. And from the entire SpaceX team here, it's been a pleasure working together to prepare for this mission. And from all of us, good luck, Godspeed, go Crew-10, and enjoy the ride.
Great comms. That was from our core here in Hawthorne in Mission Control. Now, there are many systems in place to ensure that the rocket and the crew are both safe leading up to liftoff and during flight. And now that we are in terminal count, our teams are performing those final checks before launch.
And coming up here in just a few minutes, we will start having that stage 1 engine chill start. And now we're just over 8 minutes away from launch. Again, today's ride to orbit will be about 9 minutes, which is from the time of liftoff to second stage cutoff. And then Dragon in the second stage will continue to coast for a few minutes after that prior to separation. You'll hear some performance calls along the way as we get into the final countdown and then after liftoff. And these are SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other key milestones. So some of the callouts you will hear after liftoff are a combination of letters and numbers, which will mark different abort zones throughout the flight up the eastern seaboard. The first two are 1 Alpha and 1 Bravo, which are abort modes available while the first stage is firing. And then the next round of numbers and letters you'll hear are 2 Alpha through 2 Echo, though you'll only hear the 2 Alpha call on the public loops, and those will come into play once the second stage kicks in. And then diverting a little bit from the other naming system, you will hear the call out Shannon, which refers to Shannon, Ireland. And this call means the crew could target off the coast of Ireland if they needed to abort late in the second stage burn. And you'll continue to hear those different call outs along with key performance call outs from the guidance, navigation, and control officer along with the propulsion lead. We're now just under 7 minutes away from launch.
Engines are chilling in for flight.
And we just heard that confirmation that the stage 1 engine chill has started.
Yeah, exactly. That call out is because we are flowing a little bit of liquid oxygen into the engines. That's to help prepare the vehicle or the engines for the full flow of liquid oxygen into the engines. That makes sure that we don't shock the system at that full flow. Now we are still loading. At liftoff, Falcon 9 is consuming about 700 gallons of fuel per second. So engine chill helps us prevent that thermal shock into the engine. So again, we have passed that T-minus 7 minute mark. Next call out will be stage 1, RP1 loading complete, which we just heard that.
And the RP1 is densified kerosene or rocket fuel that will propel the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is now fully loaded into the rocket, and since we previously heard that second stage loading was completed. We are still loading the liquid oxygen or LOX onto the first and second stages, and this is the oxidizer needed to combine with the densified kerosene that just finished loading. The RP1 liquid propellant needs an oxidizer to combine with in order to ignite. Coming up in just under 30 seconds at that T-minus 5 minute mark, we will hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and then transition over to internal power.
Tanks are pressing for Stromback retrack.
Dragon is in, configure for terminal count.
And there we just heard that call out for terminal count. So now Dragon onboard computers will take control of the spacecraft. And we also heard that the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, adding some additional structural support to the rocket as we get ready for that strong back to retract. And that strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines.
Has started.
That strong back lower has now started, and again, that strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for both propellant load and the different gases being loaded on board.
And what you should see on your screen is there's those clamp arms that are around the second stage just below Dragon. They're going to open up, and once they're fully open, then that strong back or the TE can begin to recline away from the vehicle. Now, initially, we are going to recline that TE just about 2 degrees away from the vehicle, and then we will fully move the TE about 45 degrees away up at T0. And they're maybe a little hard to see on your screen, but the clamp arms are opening up there. There's a better view. Looks like the clamp arms are now fully open, so that TE will begin to move away from the vehicle. Very slow and slight, but just enough to get two degrees away from the vehicle.
And then coming up in less than 30 seconds at the T-3 minute mark, the first stage liquid oxygen or LOX load will complete. And we'll continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones, including one around the T-2 minute mark before flight, where we'll hear liquid oxygen loading is complete on the second stage. And now you see all of those white clouds on your screen. Those are clouds of vapor, and they're completely normal, and we'll see them continue to build up as we get closer to launch. This is because liquid oxygen is super chilled, so a little of it will boil off in the warmer Florida air.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
Great call out there. Stage 1.
Count and on.
Putting liquid oxygen onto stage 2, and that'll wrap up here at the T-2 minute mark, just about 20 seconds from now. And once we finish propellant loading, that will mean that 1 million pounds of RP1 and liquid oxygen will be loaded onto Falcon 9 here, just under 10 seconds.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
We just heard confirmation that the stage 2 liquid oxygen loading is now complete. We are under 2 minutes away from launch. Gas closeout has also begun. So we're now isolating all of the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. And those gases will then get vented overboard through umbilicals and the strong back. And you just heard that call out that Dragon is an
Ground
auto
gas
aisle.
closeouts, expect loud venting.
Well, you can hear that venting now. Obviously, rockets are very loud, and the sound can impart pressure loads back on the rocket itself. The ton of water absorbs and prevents the sound from hitting the structure and reverberating back onto the rocket. And that call out for auto idle puts the rocket in a state the flight computers understand before it takes over, making sure the transition to final countdown is smooth and all the flight computers on board are in sync and configured for launch.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And now we just heard that Falcon 9 is in startup.
Anything countdown.
And in the final countdown, less than a minute to go, and at the time of launch, the space station will be flying 260 statute miles over the west coast of Australia.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
And great call out.
SpaceX, Dragon Crew-10, copy, go for launch.
Great call out that we're go for launch, and we do have a large crowd here in front of Mission Control.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Waiting to watch Crew-10 take off today.
T-minus 15. T-minus 10. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go NASA Crew-10.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
And liftoff of Crew-10 now
Vehicle pitching downrange.
Space Station. 1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and Crew-10. And we're continuing to get good call-outs on the first stage performance so far. We're now 40 seconds into today's flight.
Power and telemetry nominal.
continuing to get good performance call-outs.
Throttle down.
Yeah, we are throttling down the engines in preparation for Max Q. What great timing that was. We just passed through Max Q. That's the largest structural load that the vehicle will see on ascent.
Vehicle supersonic.
Stage 1, throttle up.
We're now just over 1 minute and 10 seconds into today's flight, traveling at more than 1,400 miles per hour.
Stage 1 Bravo.
And we just heard that
SpaceX
call out
copies,
for
1
Bravo, which means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage, continuing to get good performance. And the crew already pulling over 2 Gs. Next up, we'll have a couple of events happening in rapid succession.
Back chill started.
First will be that engine chill on the second stage impact engine, which we just heard. And then we'll have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and second stages. Will be separating from one another. Then the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry Crew-10 to orbit while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth. Now we're just 2 minutes into today's flight. The vehicle is traveling just under 4,000 miles per hour.
We're just about 20 seconds away from those events that Anna just mentioned. The 9 Merlin engines will shut down here in just about 10 seconds for MECO, stage separation, and SES-1.
Main engine cutoff.
SpaceX Dragon, 2 Alpha.
Stage separation confirmed.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
Great call-outs and incredible views there on your left-hand screen. On your left-hand screen, you can see a view from stage 1. And an extremely excited crowd here in Hawthorne. Awesome views of that boost back burn on the first stage, as well as the MVAC engine igniting on the second stage. Great views there. Now the booster is in its boost back burn. This is the first of 3 burns as it makes its way back down to Earth. This will last about 45 seconds. And the Crew-10 crew is still on board Dragon, attached to Falcon 9 second stage, which you can see there on your right-hand screen.
And we're now at 3 minutes and 20 seconds into today's flight. The vehicle is traveling about 6,500 miles per hour. And they are on their way to the space station. And we did have that confirmation coming up of the boost back shutdown. And then coming up at the T+6 minute mark. And there we have our first images of the crew inside the Dragon spacecraft as they make their way into orbit. And the crew
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Continuing to get good call-outs.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
Stage 2, it continues to be on power with in its firing until we get to that second stage engine cutoff around the 9-minute mark of flight. About 5 minutes of flight to go before Dragon will be flying free.
Some cool views there on your left-hand screen. That's the first stage booster as it's making its way back down to Earth. This is a ground tracking camera getting these awesome views.
And on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see that lone Merlin vacuum engine of the second stage. We're continuing to get good performance on the second stage. And the crew's G-loads will dip right when we hit the separation events, and it's going to continue to build up until then.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
We're now at 5 minutes into today's flight with a liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Pacific, 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. Continuing to get good call-outs as Stage 1 makes its way back to Earth, and Stage 2 continues to fire, propelling Dragon into orbit.
If you're just now joining us, the 4 members of Crew-10 launched from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And they're currently on board Dragon, still attached to Falcon 9 second stage, which you're seeing there on your right-hand screen. On your left-hand screen, the first stage vehicle is making its way back down to Earth. It already completed the first of 3 burns as the boost back burn, and The next event coming up for that vehicle is going to be the entry burn.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Great call-outs there. That entry burn is coming up.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
That entry burn is coming up here in just under 20 seconds. We'll reignite 3 of those 9 Merlin 1D engines to help slow the vehicle down as it makes its way back into the Earth's atmosphere.
We're now just over 6 minutes into today's flight as Dragon and the second stage continue traveling at over 12,000 miles per hour, making their way into orbit and on the way to the International Space Station.
There we just saw on the screen, it was very quick, but we had the entry burn, which we got some cool views of that from the ground, which is awesome. Now the next event coming up will be the landing burn for the first stage. That's coming up here in about 30 seconds.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Again, great call outs for
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
Confirmation there from the crew as they continue to make their way into orbit. Now 7 minutes into today's flight, the first stage making its way back down to Earth and the second stage continuing to fire.
This is an awesome view. Let's see if we can see the center engine relight for that landing burn here in a few seconds. There's that landing burn. Let's watch as Falcon 9 touches down on landing zone 1. And the crowd here is excited to see Falcon 9 touch down on landing zone 1.
And now that the first stage has made its way back to Earth, we're about a minute away from the second engine cutoff, which we're expecting around the 9-minute mark of today's flight. We're continuing to get good call-outs, and Dragon and all of the systems on the vehicle are performing as expected. Just over 8 minutes into today's flight, traveling more than 21,000 miles per hour.
Terminal guidance.
Hearing good call-outs. We're about 30 seconds away from that second engine cutoff, and then shortly after that, about a minute or so later, we will have orbital insertion.
SpaceX Dragon, Shannon.
SpaceX copy, Shannon.
And that call out there for Shannon, and that is the call out for Shannon, Ireland, which is the final abort stage for the second stage off the coast of Ireland. Standing by for a second engine cutoff.
And back shutdown. Dragon SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
And there we heard confirmation
Launch escape system disarmed.
Good confirmation of orbital insertion. Crew-10 is now well on their way to the International Space Station following a 9.5-minute flight uphill.
Now, the second stage is preparing for Dragon separation here, which should happen shortly. In about 10-15 seconds is what we're expecting. Now we're preparing for stabilizing the second stage so that we can have a smooth separation.
And there you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, the crowd is going wild. There on your screen you can see that Dragon separation, that second stage making its way, and Dragon is now flying free. 10 minutes into today's flight, that was about a minute after we had that second engine cutoff and orbital insertion. And it looks like a good separation, good rates. Dragon now flying free. There on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see some first images of Crew-10 inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as they're now successfully in orbit.
Dragon, SpaceX Chief Engineer on Countdown 1. On behalf of the entire Falcon team, we thank you for flying with Falcon and wish you a great mission. Over to LD.
It was an honor flying with you this evening. We wish you well on your journey and give Crew 9 our best. Thank you for flying SpaceX.
SpaceX Dragon, this is Crew-10 Commander Ann McClain. Thank you to all of the teams from across the world who contributed to the launch today. Spaceflight is tough, but humans are tougher. Days like today are made possible only when people choose to do the harder right over the easier wrong. Build relationships, choose cooperation, and believe in the inherent goodness of all people across the world. To my family and friends, without you, I would not be here. Explore boldly, live gracefully, go Crew-10. And over to pilot Nicole Ayers.
Pilot Nicole Ayers again. We're not the first humans to get to orbit, and we wouldn't be here without the bravery and hard work of those who have paved the way for human spaceflight. We now get the unique perspective of Earth without borders and get to revel in the connectedness of humanity. I would be remiss to not once again acknowledge those who helped me get here, to this wonderful view and this perspective, to the teachers, coaches, fellow officers, fellow teammates, Raptor Nation, to my friends and family that encouraged my dreams from the start. Thank you. I wouldn't be here without you.
This is Mission Specialist Takuya Onishi. I want to say a huge thank you to NASA and SpaceX, especially the Falcon 9 team for the successful launch, and we are looking forward to a smooth ride to the International Space Station. 日本の皆さん、たくさんの応援ありがとうございます。9年ぶりの無重力の感覚をかみしめてます。これから先の ISS への宇宙の旅、楽しんでいきたいと思います。I will now hand the mic over to Mission Specialist Kirill.
Thanks a lot to NASA and SpaceX for this wonderful ride, and I want to say a couple of words in Russian. Пользуясь такой чудесной возможностью, хочу поздравить с 65-летием со дня начала подготовки первого отряда. И также хочу сказать спасибо большое за те знания и жизненный опыт, который мной были получены в всех стенах для того, чтобы выполнить этот полет. А также спасибо школе номер 14 города Назарова, Ульяновскому высшему авиационному училищу гражданской авиации и авиакомпании «Макар» и «Нордвин», где я начинал свой путь в небо. И, конечно же, спасибо большое семье и за поддержку.
Thank you, Crew 10. At this time, I can report nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts.
SpaceX Dragon, copy.
And such great words from Crew 10, as well as the core here in Hawthorne and Mission Control. We also got confirmation that the nose cone deploy is underway. The 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during the launch and ascent portions have to retract, and then the nose cone will be able to start to swing open and deploy. Now, this uncovers a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. Just pausing in case there were going to be any comms. And we did have good confirmation, good checkouts of the 12 Draco thrusters around the service section. Now, four to go after we get the nose cone open and then the ECLIS, the environmental control and life support system, activated inside of Dragon. Now, soon the crew will be able to get their visors open and get out of their suits and settle in for the ride to the space station.
And now we're just waiting for confirmation that the nose cone has fully deployed with all of the hooks open. But just to recap a little bit, we did have a successful liftoff of Crew-10 about 18 minutes ago at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. And following an approximately 9-minute ride after liftoff, we had that orbital insertion, and Dragon and Crew-10 were flying free and well on their way to the International Space Station. They now have an approximately a 28-hour journey before they do reach their destination of the space station, and that docking is targeted for tomorrow, March 15th at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, 11:30 p.m. Eastern, to the forward-facing port of the station's Harmony module. Between now and then, Dragon will perform a series of burns as it catches up to the space station, and that first burn will be a phase burn about 30 minutes from now at 4:52 p.m. Pacific, 7:52 p.m. Eastern.
And the nose cone is about 75% open at this point. Human spaceflight has come so far in the last 5 years with Dragon. In addition to flying people, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft also enables researchers the opportunity to fly critical science to orbit. And so far, SpaceX and Dragon have carried over 1,000 research experiments to and from low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions. From DNA sequencing to 3D printing studies enabled by Dragon and the space station tests Dragon and the space station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions. Now, every mission yields critical science and research and learnings that help make life both on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay this foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary.
Once Crew-10 does arrive to the International Space Station, they will, of course, partake in some additional science and research. They will have over 200 experiments that they will contribute to during their time aboard the International Space Station. Again, we're just standing by for confirmation that that nose cone has fully deployed. And we may also get some additional look inside the cabin of the crew.
Yeah, as we patiently wait for those views, we are trying to see if we can get some views.
T-minus 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go NASA Crew-10.
NASA and SpaceX's Crew-10 launching away on Pi Day.
1.7 million pounds of thrust.
Hello and welcome to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida for the post-launch news conference for NASA and SpaceX's successful Crew-10 launch to the International Space Station. Anne McClain, Nicole Ayers, Takuya Onishi, and Kirill Peskov launched from Launch Complex 39A at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time today and are now in orbit. They are set to arrive at their destination, the International Space Station, at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Saturday, March 15th. Joining me to answer your questions for the media in the room and online about the Crew-10 launch and mission are to my left, Ken Bowersox, Associate Administrator, NASA Space Operations Mission Directorate, Steve Stitch, Manager, NASA's Commercial Crew Program, Dina Cantella, Deputy Manager, NASA's International Space Station Program, Sarah Walker, Director, Dragon Mission Management at SpaceX, and Mayumi Matsura, Vice President and Director General of the Human Spaceflight Technology Directorate at JAXA. All right, we'll start off with some opening comments. And Ken, we'll start with you.
Thanks. Hey, good evening, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight for this conference. You know, part of NASA's job is to share what we do with the general public, and all of you are part of that. So I want you to know how much I appreciate the work that you put into your reporting. To all the folks that are watching at home, I appreciate that you're with us and listening to hear about the mission tonight. It was great to see the Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off with an international crew from Russia, Japan, and America. That always gets me excited. But I know we made you wait a couple days to see that. We spotted a small issue with the ground system. It was so impressive to watch the team make the call on console, decide what they were going to do, proceed through the troubleshooting and minor fixes that had to be done the next day, look at the weather, decide that the smart thing to do was to move to today, and we were rewarded with beautiful weather and a really, really smooth launch. And that's worth waiting for, I think. Now we wait another day for Crew-10 to make their way to the space station to join Crew-9 there. They'll hand over for a few days, and then we'll bring Crew-9 back to Earth, and they'll splash down, and we'll get to hear all their stories. Every crew that launches is one more set of stories, one more step to humanity moving to the moon and out onto Mars. And so I hope you feel that when you see a Falcon 9 lift off the pad and when you see our crews come home. And now I'm going to pass over to Steve to give you some more of the technical details.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and thank you for being here. Thanks for your interest in the Commercial Crew Program and human spaceflight. As you watched earlier, we had a great launch this evening at 7:03 p.m. Eastern. It was a very smooth countdown. Before I talk about the countdown and the mission, I just want to start out by saying how proud I am of the NASA and SpaceX team. As you know, we've talked about it. It's been a unique flow. About a little more than 6 weeks ago, we swapped Dragon capsules. We swapped over from the new capsule that's being built by SpaceX over to Endurance, and that new capsule is now on orbit with the Crew-10 crew. Of course, we added a parachute upgrade, the energy modulator, which the drogues pull the mains out with a device that attenuates the load. We have that on board the vehicle. And then, of course, we have a new landing site, Tortuga, that we can use for Crew-9. Crew-9 is planned to be our last East Coast landing. And then we're also preparing to move and transition landing operations to the West Coast. So we have a lot going on. And then executing the handover and bringing Crew-9 home is a big deal. When we last talked, we had a couple issues that remained from the flight readiness review on March 7th. We closed those out. We had some coding degradation on the Draco thrusters. We ran a test at McGregor, looked at some other testing data, and closed that out. And then we also, SpaceX, we learned from every non-NASA Falcon 9 mission. They had a Starlink anomaly post-landing with an engine 8 combustion event post-landing, and we looked at the data from that, and we're able to clear that for flight. You know, this team is dedicated, resilient, and learns from every single flight, every single step, and I'm very proud of the team. Dragon Endurance is on orbit now, and it's very healthy, nominal spacecraft separation, nominal orbit insertion. The nose cone opened just fine. We tested out the forward bulkhead Dracos. Those are doing fine. All the Draco thrusters are firing well. We did a phase burn a little while ago around 7:56 Eastern, and that went well. Falcon 9 performed extremely well. You saw the booster land at landing zone 1, and the one thing, and Sarah will talk more about it, is that you saw a little piece of foam come off the second stage tank on the LOX tank. It's there for insulation. That was in the video. And so that was no issue for the flight, no recontact with Dragon at all. On Wednesday, we ended up scrubbing the launch, and the team did a great job with that scrub. It turned out on the hydraulic system, there's a series of clamps that have to release the Falcon 9 at liftoff, and they have to move out of the way so that the rocket can then clear the launch pad. We saw some signs of air in the system that in the past SpaceX has been able to bleed that air out of the system. If you've ever had squishy brakes in your car, it's the same thing where you have air in the system and so you don't know the hydraulic system response. They tried to flush that air out of the system on launch day on Wednesday. We couldn't get comfortable that all the air was out of there, so we took the prudent course of action and we scrubbed that day. And then SpaceX went in and bled the air out of the system. In some points of the lines that go to the Falcon 9 Heavy side of the system, they were able to get all that air out and ran a bunch of checks overnight, last night and into today, and the system performed very well today. Really, the vehicle is doing well on orbit. Dragon, we're not really working any issues. We have about a 28.5-hour launch to dock profile, setting up to rendezvous at 11:30 p.m. tomorrow night. The crew will go off duty this evening about this time. They'll do a few things like grab some air samples and then set up some cabin temperature measurements, and then other than that, they'll be off duty. As you saw, the weather was just awesome today. We couldn't ask for a better day here at the launch site in the abort weather. The mission events heading into docking, we'll have a Dragon mission management team tomorrow evening around 8 p.m. And then we'll have this crew will get into their suits around 9 p.m. And then approach initiations right around 11 or 10 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night, and then docking at 11:30. And we should have the hatches open about 1:30 in the morning. So we're looking forward to docking and starting off the handover. Can't thank the team enough, and I'll turn it over to Dina.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And thank you all for being here. It was a spectacular launch. Really happy to have the crew on their way to the International Space Station and looking forward to seeing their happy faces on board very soon. As is mentioned, they'll dock tomorrow night, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time, to the forward port of the International Space Station. We're going to have a short handover with the Crew-9 guys coming home no earlier than Wednesday at this point. Of course, we'll be looking for good weather. It might be later than Wednesday when they come home. We're trying to keep the handover shorter because recently and last year we've had some handovers that were more extended, waiting on good weather, and so we don't want to lose any good opportunities that we might have in this case. We're trying to stretch the consumables, we'd rather have less of an overlap of the crews in this particular situation. So after the Crew-9 guys get home, the Crew-10 and the Soyuz crew on board, they have a lot of work to do on this increment. I'll just hit some of the highlights of the upcoming items here in the next month or two. First off, we've got the Northrop Grumman 21 mission that's currently berthed to station, and we'll have the crew stuff that full of trash. They've been working on that, but we're going to make sure that they can get as much trash in there as possible. It's around the 21st or so of this month, but we're assessing that date maybe a little later at this point, and that will unberth it, release it, and it will re-enter and be disposed of. And then we have another crew exchange happening in the April timeframe. So on April 8th, we have a Soyuz launch. It's with Sergei Ryzhikov, Alexei Zubritsky, and Johnny Kim. They'll be taking off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Once they're on board, they'll be doing their handover. Coming home, we'll have Alexei Ovchinin, Ivan Wagner, and Don Pettit. And they'll come home on the 19th of April. Before Alexei Ovchinin leaves, he'll hand over the station command to Takoya Anishi, and so I'll have a JAXA commander on board at that point. On the heels of that crew exchange, we've got SpaceX 32. That's a cargo mission. That's really important for us. It's be carrying, in addition to all the science that it'll be carrying, it's carrying a lot of crew supplies. The Northrop Grumman 22 vehicle that's launching this summer, that launch date's under review, And so the Northrop Grumman guys have noticed that the shipping container was damaged. You may have heard that from Dana Weigel from the last conference. And so to be on the safe side, we've added some additional food to the SpaceX 32 mission just to make sure that we're stretching consumables as much as we can. But there's quite a bit of science that is going to be taking place on this increment, and I just want to give you a few examples. So on this mission on Crew-10, both launching up and coming down on Crew-9, we've got, as an example, an ESA, European Space Agency payload that's studying immune health. On Crew-10, launching on this flight, right now in flight, we have a water filtration experiment. And on the way down on Crew-9, we'll be bringing home some red romaine lettuce leaves that were harvested by the crew on board. So while the crew's there, we'll be doing combustion experiments. We'll be talking to thousands of students, and we're doing a series of tests, both physiological and psychological, that will help us on our trips to, in our lunar adventures and on a future trip to Mars. So we have a lot of science going on, and I think that some of you know that it's the 25th anniversary of continuous human presence coming up here in November on board the International Space Station. But, we live and breathe science every day on ISS, and every day researchers are learning something new, so even 25 years later. So with that plug, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Dina. Well, it has been an exciting week, as always, down here at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And it's an honor to be here today, having just launched our Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. This was our first launch to ISS so far this year, and when it docks tomorrow night, it'll be the 45th Dragon and the 14th with a crew on board to visit the orbiting lab. So this mission was particularly dynamic, as many of you were aware. A little over a month ago, as Steve mentioned, NASA and SpaceX switched the Dragon spacecraft supporting this mission to accelerate the Crew-10 launch and ultimately the Crew-9 return. These types of schedule changes represent an enormous amount of work under the surface, from adjusting hardware milestones and test dates on multiple spacecraft to juggling traffic of the visiting vehicles on ISS, coordinating launch and reentry events with numerous external agencies, expediting hardware and cargo shipments across the country, and changing final training dates for the crew and operators, and so much more. So I just wanted to say, in all of this, SpaceX and NASA kept safety at the forefront as we methodically stepped towards this launch date while accelerating the timeline by several weeks. And then NASA also enabled this handover, as Dina was talking about, to be a few days shorter than typical, which further accelerates the Crew-9 return date coming up in just a few short days. So we had originally set up to launch on Wednesday, but during Wednesday night's attempt, we detected an indication in the data that there might be some trapped air, as Steve alluded to, in the groundside plumbing that leads to the hold-down clamps out at the pad. So we cycled the clamps themselves, open and closed several times throughout the count to make sure that the kinematic behavior was exactly as expected, but we couldn't figure out why the signature was still showing there might be some air there in the system. And so out of an abundance of caution, we stepped into scrubbing the launch for the day. On Thursday, the teams fed fluid through those lines to clear any potential trapped air, and then turns out that resolved the issue and set up for a beautiful launch today. So tonight, I found it to be a fantastic day to launch, both being Pi Day and the 23rd anniversary of SpaceX's founding, 23 years ago on March 14th. So yes, we did have Pi in launch control, if you're wondering. And I'm happy to report that Falcon 9 safely delivered the crew and Dragon to their intended orbit, with an anticipated arrival, already been said, about 11:30 p.m. tomorrow, Eastern Time. So if you're watching the webcast, you might have noticed something floating off during the separation event between Dragon and the second stage. This is a piece of insulation foam from our Stage 2 LOX dome, and these insulation tiles are known to sometimes liberate during this separation event. It doesn't pose any issues for Dragon or Stage 2. It's made out of Zotec. It's a foam material that did its job on the way to orbit, and then it's okay if it liberates. After Crew-10 docks to ISS, the next big event for us will be bringing Crew-9 safely home to their families. We're excited to welcome Nick, Alex, Sunny, and Butch back after the time at the space station, and we're inspired by all the groundbreaking research that they completed during their increment. So undocking currently no earlier than Wednesday, March 19th, and as Dina mentioned, we will continue to look at the weather and find the best day to bring the crew home, hopefully next week. So Crew-9 will be the last Dragon mission to return to the East Coast before the recovery transition west that we've all been talking about. So Crew-9 will return to the Gulf at one of our 5 landing sites there, and then we'll have a few Dragon missions that land on the West Coast before Crew-10 comes home in July or August. So I want to say a huge thank you to our launch partners for your trust and collaboration on this launch. There are so many ways that these 2 missions were unique, but I think for me personally, the most powerful was being a more integrated part of the global mission of human spaceflight. So we see ISS as this beacon of international collaboration, and Crew-9 felt like a small part of that, where 2 companies got to work together to the greater goal of advancing human spaceflight missions and making humanity a spacefaring civilization. So that was an honor to be a part of. And yeah, just thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be a part of all this and all the research the crews aboard the space station conduct. Thank you. And Mayumi,
thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everybody. I am Mayumi Matsura from JAXA. And first of all, on behalf of JAXA, I'd like to sincerely express our appreciation to NASA, SpaceX, and our international partners, and all those who are struggling for today's Crew-10 launch and the continuous ISS operation. And I am very happy to be here to share with you all today's success of Crew-10 launch. And it is a great pleasure, not only for me, but also for Japan, that Japanese astronauts boarded the Crew Dragon for 5th straight year since its debut flight in 2020. And I think this was brought by close cooperation cultivated between US and Japan for years through ISS program. And as for Takuya Onishi, this is the 2nd ISS stay mission for him. And during the first stay, he said he realized the importance of working together with ground team. And then he had a strong desire to deepen his knowledge on flight control team work. And as a result, he became a flight director, and Japanese JAXA flight director, and its call sign is JFlight. And since then, he has been supporting the ISS and the GEM operation as JFlight, and then using his perspective as an astronaut. And in addition to that, as Dina mentioned, Takuya will support as an ISS commander this time while he is on board. And as far as I know, an ISS commander from active flight director is not only the first in Japan, but also in the world. And many of you are probably not aware of this, so I'd like to highlight that point. And he will undoubtedly make good use his new knowledge he gained from JFlight work to serve as an ISS commander. And I do believe he will show us a great teamwork that no one has ever seen before. And this time, a Crew-10 mission is definitely a symbol of solid international partnership. And I know that partnership, not just Crew-10, has been and will continue to be essential for our space activities. And human space activity, as you know, are expanding from ISS, Rio, to further spheres such like Moon and Mars. So today's success based on our international partnership is another step toward the further future space activities. And lastly, I am deeply honored to witness this historic moment with you all. And once again, congratulations on the successful launch today. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for those opening comments. We will now take your questions, beginning with those in the room here at Kennedy. Please raise your hand, state your name and affiliation, and to whom you are asking the question. And we'll start with Marcia.
NAP. Looking ahead to splashdown, if you undock Wednesday, when might that occur? And given that Butch and Sunny have been up for 9 months, are there any special precautions you're going to need to take to accommodate them, or extra medical tests to learn more about long-duration space flight? And what kind of celebrations are you planning after they've gone above and beyond for almost a year?
I'll take the first part and see if Dean has anything to add. I think the undocking time we're looking at might be as early as 4 in the morning Eastern, 4 a.m. In terms of precautions, they'll have the standard precautions that any crew has. They'll obviously have their suits that we've sent up and tried them on. They've got custom seats that are made to fit their body and their suits. And then, every crew that comes back goes through a fluid loading protocol just to make sure when they get back that their body is conditioned properly. But they'll go through there's nothing beyond what we'll normally do. They've done training already on the Dragon spacecraft while they've been on orbit to get familiar with the differences in the suits and the umbilicals and the seats and all that. So they'll be ready to come home when we're ready. We'll watch the weather. The weather's always a challenge. It's always windy over the water. We'll have to find the right opportunity. And then in terms of celebrations, I don't think we've thought that far ahead. Obviously, we're excited to get Crew 9 back, and I know Butch and Sunny are excited to come back. And then we'll celebrate, when they're ready. It'll take a little time to get them back reconditioned, and then we'll do a proper celebration and see if Dana has anything to add.
I'll just add a couple of things that undock if it's around 4 in the morning on Wednesday. The phasing will vary depending on where our landing site will be and how long we'll be in transit essentially to that splashdown location. Sarah had mentioned that we'll be targeting only certain sites, the Gulf sites essentially in Florida, so we'll have fewer opportunities, but we haven't pinpointed the exact one that'll be available to us. I'll also just note that Butch and Sunny have been on orbit for a little over 280 days or something. We can get you that trivia, but there have been many crew members who've been on orbit longer than that, and so we don't see any need for any special precaution. Like any astronauts coming back, there's an acclimation period, and so that'll vary by crew member, and also it does vary by how long they've been on orbit sometimes. So, but I'm not aware of any special precautions or parties, although, of course, you never know.
All right, let's go to the front row here on the left-hand side.
Hi, I'm Faith Abube. I'm with ABC News. There are several steps before the Crew-10 team docks at the ISS. Are there any more concerns about anything that could possibly go wrong at this point?
I mean, obviously there's lots of steps, right? There's a series of maneuvers we have to do. We did one maneuver today, a rendezvous maneuver. We'll do a number of those as well. The crew today will get out of their suits and be in the spacecraft, and then they'll get back in their suits for docking. We'll check out the docking system. We'll go through all the standard steps. We're going to take it one step at a time and watch the vehicle carefully and watch the crew carefully on the way to rendezvous and docking. But there's nothing unusual so far. The spacecraft is very healthy. The crew's healthy. So we'll just take it one step at a time on the way to docking.
And Steve's being very modest. Getting a spacecraft to rendezvous with another object in orbit, it requires incredibly precise navigation, planning, and our systems do that very well, right? And so what he's saying is our systems are all working good, so we're going to be able to do that really amazing thing and dock with the space station.
All right, another question in the front.
Thank you. Sawyer Rosenstein, NSF. This is probably for Steve. I know there was questions on the Wednesday attempt, the fact that you had SphereX launching within less than 24 hours. There was a Starlink that was supposed to launch within less than 24 hours. Can you kind of clarify the NASA rule to if that is still the case with no Falcon launches 24 hours before one of the NASA missions? And are there any plans to reduce that time as the launch cadence goes up?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had initially, a number of years ago, established a 48-hour time frame in between our launch and another Falcon 9 launch. We recently, for this mission, reduced that time to 24 hours. And then we looked at the timing of the specific missions. SpaceX was about 21 hours, and we talked to our team and looked at the amount of work we needed to do to look at the vehicle at Falcon 9 launch for SpaceX. We also had a NASA team in place observing that launch, and so we adjusted the time to 21 hours. So we're constantly looking at those missions. What we feel like now is we learn from every single Falcon 9 flight, and so it's really an advantage, a safety advantage to us to have Falcon 9 fly, see if we can learn something from that flight, and if there's something off nominal, we can actually stand down and evaluate it. So we had the benefit before our flight of not only the SpaceX launch, the NASA SMD launch, but also a Starlink launch as well that fell within that 21-hour period.
All right, we are going to take a phone question, and we'll come back into the room and get you guys. Micah Maidenberg with the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good evening. For Steve and Sarah, did NASA and SpaceX accept more risk for the Crew-10 flight compared with earlier crew missions, given the changes that have been, you guys made in the run-up to this week? And if that's the case, could you kind of explain that and quantify it if possible? Thanks very much.
I wouldn't say there are any additional risks taken. This is one of the benefits of having multiple spacecraft in different processing lanes at the same time. The vehicle that we switched to was pretty far along in its launch processing campaign for another mission that we're flying later in the spring, and so that was available. We did look at some of the nuanced differences between requirements of various contracts between the NASA contracts and others, and that drove some amount of work on this particular vehicle. He was mentioning the coating degradation that we looked at to ensure that the engines were ready to fly, but no, it was a pretty standard pre-launch process other than switching around the order of hardware and tests and when we did what on which spacecraft, from my perspective.
And from NASA perspective, we went through our normal process. We did it in I would say, an accelerated time frame. We look at what we call non-conformances, anything that maybe any valve that didn't perform exactly per the spec or exactly per the right timing. We have certain witnesses that we do and inspection points that we go through as the Dragon spacecraft is built up. We missed a couple of those on the NASA side. We actually witnessed the heat shield installation, but we went and looked at all the build records. We have enough experience with the technicians for the heat shield assembly, and so we felt comfortable with that. Probably the one area that maybe was a little bit more risk, I would say, was the coating on these thrusters. These thrusters had flown a few more times than we had in the past. We went and analyzed that very carefully. We did a set of testing with a very similar thruster. SpaceX did it in McGregor, Texas, and then we went back and looked at the qualification data just to make sure we were good to go. So we went through our standard process, standard flight readiness review, and commercial crew, agency FRR process, solicited dissenting opinions, asked our engineers if they were ready, and we felt very confident to go into the launch campaign.
And Steve, remind me, the fleet following or the witnessing of tests and inspections that you guys do with us, you often do that you follow not only the capsule that's the primary plan for your mission, but also others. Was this one that you had already been following along with to some extent as well?
In following this capsule, obviously we had flown it before. Last time was on Crew-7, and we had started a little bit early to start looking at this capsule. And the capsule also has some upgrades. One of the upgrades that I talked about is a new energy modulator system. We talked about skip stitching on previous flights. We're flying an energy modulator on this particular vehicle that we tested at the Langley Research Center. There's a facility there that we can actually subject that energy modulator to all the loads and forces that we would see in flight. And we think this is a significant upgrade that we're going to go fly. So, as Sarah said, we followed the whole fleet, and we were in a good posture to go fly this vehicle.
Okay. Question here in the second row.
With Talking Space, question for Steve. Thinking about troubleshooting and problem solving, what would be a key, it seems like focus would be a key element to successful troubleshooting and problem solving. What would help you individually and the teams that are part of the organization to focus and have success each day, each challenge?
Yeah, I think, in engineering and spaceflight, I was just thinking this morning, I was texting a friend and he asked me if the launch was still on track. I said, yeah, the launch is still on track. Everything's working fine. And then I thought to myself, a spacecraft and a launch vehicle and the pad has millions of parts that have to work correctly, and we have to test those parts. And every single day, and I've been watching our team very carefully ever since the beginning of the year, and they've been focused. They've been going through the testing on the vehicle, been following along with the testing, doing independent analysis that NASA does. And so, we're very focused on this mission, Crew-10, and then we're also focused on the Crew-9 vehicle on orbit and making sure that vehicle is safe to bring the Crew-9 crew back as well. So it's really just attention to detail every single day, making sure that everybody does their job. It's a bit like a football team. Everybody has their job, whether you be an offensive lineman, a wide receiver, or tight end. You have your job to do, and you just watch to make sure that everybody is being diligent and asking the right questions. And the interaction between NASA and SpaceX is phenomenal. On the particular problem we had at the launch pad, the NASA team looked at the data, and SpaceX team looked at the data. We weren't quite comfortable, had multiple meetings back and forth on the data. Just today, with a NASA guide, one of our experts on the hydraulic system wanted to replot all the data one last time just to make sure we're ready to go fly, and he did that. And I talked to him before I went on console, and he was ready to go. So.
All right, a question here in the front row.
Yeah, Eliana Sheriff with Ellie in Space, and this question is for whoever can answer it. The current administration has made claims that the previous administration refused to bring home these Starliner astronauts despite an offer being made. Can you give us any clarity about this?
I think the short answer is I can't give you a lot of clarity there because those discussions I wasn't part of. So I can't tell you if they did happen or didn't happen. All I can tell you is NASA is an incredible nonpartisan agency. We get support from whoever is in office. Our presidents always care a lot about what happens at NASA, and it's great to see that trend continue with our current president. He injects a lot of energy into our thought processes, and that's been helpful for us.
All right, let's go to the back of the room. Bill Harwood.
Hey, thanks. Bill Harwood, CBS News. For really anybody, this mission has taken on this whole thing with Crew-9 and getting Bush and Sonny home that I've never really seen with any other mission to this level. I don't know whether you call it hype or whether you call it, is it reasonable? What do you guys think about that? The fact that you're launching Crew-10, but you can't start a story about Crew-10 without putting Bush and Sonny in the lead. So, and which is fine with me. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just wondering what you guys think of that from a NASA perspective, the way this has taken on this life of its own.
I can start and then let Ken comment. I appreciate all the interest in the mission. I appreciate the interest in NASA, but for us, it's really about doing the job that we do every single flight to get the Crew-10 Dragon spacecraft, the Falcon 9 vehicle, ready to go fly, to fly the crew that we have on that spacecraft to the station, and then execute the handover. And it's the same thing with the spacecraft that's there. Just a few days ago, we inspected the thermal protection system, just like we would for any mission, to make sure that it's good to go return home with the external high-def cameras on the space station and also the robotic arm. So we try to just focus on what's important, and what's important is really making sure that we can safely return the crew and safely get the crew there, and I try to avoid with my team getting too much into the hype, and they are so focused and doing their job. I'm so proud of both the SpaceX and NASA team for doing their job in this situation that's, as you said, Bill, it's a little different than what we experienced in the past, and we'll see if Ken has anything to add.
I'll just say it's great to see how much people care about our astronauts. If it was me, I might use different words. I think people use words to describe things based on their point of view and their frame of reference. For me, if I was going to describe the crew, I would describe them as professional, devoted, committed, really outstanding astronauts.
Okay, we're going to go to the phone line for our next question. Chris Davenport.
Hey, thanks very much for doing this.
and Sarah, thanks for mentioning that piece of insulation foam that came loose from the second stage. You said this has happened before and doesn't pose a problem, but the words loose insulation foam is just going to generate a certain response given, and I'm just wondering if this is something that SpaceX is going to look to try to fix and prevent from happening again, or if it's something that just happens and is unavoidable. Thank you.
Yeah, so these foam tiles are mounted to our LOX dome, which gets very cold. The temperature changes drastically throughout the course of it successfully getting the vehicle into orbit. And so it's, I would say, expected that occasionally you'll see some liberate just because of the thermal environment that it's exposed to as it's doing its job to get to orbit. On our satellite missions, there's actually an adapter that covers these foam pieces that the satellite is mounted to, and so you don't see it as commonly then. But Dragon, which has a kind of open air trunk, you'll more commonly see these pieces coming out of stage 2. But this is a known risk that we carry in our system that we've analyzed and we've expected because we've seen it before. So.
And I think the good thing about the foam, right, at Dragon, at Falcon 9 Dragon separation, as Sarah said, that foam is contained within the trunk. Dragon's moving away, so in terms of velocity that foam could make contact with anything, it's very low. It's a very lightweight piece, and so SpaceX has assessed that, and we know that's not a concern. I'm sure that's one of the things that SpaceX will go look at, and as they always do, to see if they can correct it over time. But in this time frame, it's not like some of the foam kind of scenarios we've had in other programs.
All right, we will come back to the room after we take one more question on the phones from Joey Roulette with Reuters.
Hey, thanks, Daryl. And thanks, guys, for doing this, and congrats on what sounds like a successful launch. And I just wanted to follow up on Micah's question, and Steve, just kind of get like a quantifiable response or some kind of number on what the probability of loss of crew for this flight was, or how different that might have been from past flights. I mean, I think, you said that this was a kind of an unusual pre-flight process this time around, and so I just, figured it'd be good to get a number on if there was any kind of numerical difference on the probability of loss of crew for this flight that you guys accepted. Thanks.
Yeah, oh gosh, I don't have the lost crew number that we use from the design phase with me, but there would have been no change in that essentially for this flight. We wouldn't have assigned a new loss of crew risk for this flight based on our process. Again, I felt like we started looking at capsule 210 endurance late last year a little bit because we thought we might be in this situation. So we started looking at some of the nonconformances. We started looking at some of the data. I mean, the Dragon vehicles, if you just compare them, they are all virtually identical except for capsule 206. The very first spacecraft, the prop system's a little different on that one. So in terms of, the safety risk for this vehicle, it really was unchanged from any other previous flight. So we didn't assign any new loss of crew number for the flight.
Okay, so the front row here, Will has a question.
Hi, Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thank you all for your time this evening. Question to Steve and to Sarah. In the write-up after the launch readiness review, it was mentioned that the leak issue that was present in B-1086 when it landed and had the subsequent fire, that was cleared to move forward with this launch, but that root cause had not been found yet at that point. Has that been resolved now, and did this flight provide any additional data that might help clear that? Thanks.
Do you want me to go for it? Or? Yeah, so we are still moving through our root cause of why the fire originated. But what we did ahead of the SpaceX mission and the Crew-10 mission is we asked ourselves, of all the possible causes, could any of these have any correlation or connection to what will happen on the ascent phase of a mission, which is what matters for this mission. And in this case, the answer was no. We found that there would have to be 3 separate anomalous events all happening simultaneously in the first 2 or 3 minutes of flight in order to see anything like what we saw there post-landing. And so that got us comfortable with with it not being an elevated risk to this mission.
And SpaceX did a great job of looking at, I would say, forensics from that booster, the 1086 booster on the drone ship. They actually looked at a particular fitting that might have been a source of a fuel leak. It had a very interesting signature where it wasn't as, of course, when you have a combustion event after landing, you're going to see a lot of heat damage components. This one wasn't, so they think maybe this particular fitting might have been leaking a little bit of fuel on that particular booster. We went and analyzed our booster. We did a static fire. We didn't see any fuel leaks. We actually sniffed for fuel to see if there was any present in any of the 9 engine bays. There was not. We actually went in on a couple of the bays and looked at this area where there was a fitting, and so that's a potential root cause. And then we looked at, the thing that you would be worried about if you had a fuel leak is a LOX leak during ascent. And the vehicle that we just flew was very tight during static fire. It was tight during all the testing at McGregor. And so that gave us rationale to go fly the flight. And of course, SpaceX resumed their other missions as well, and we learned from those flights.
Okay, the third row. Sorry. Yeah.
Important part of all of this if there were to be a fire to break out in one engine, for example. And we did actually see an engine out scenario, gosh, in the old days, I think it was CRS-1 or 2 to 10, 12 years ago, right? But that rocket had an engine out. It has sufficient scaffolding to isolate the fire to that single engine bay. And then the rest of the engines complete the mission as planned. And so that's, I guess, an additional layer of protection. If we were to see an event like this, we wouldn't expect it to propagate to the rest of the rocket.
Saparo with NBC News. Thanks again for doing this. This is for whoever wants to answer this one. I'm sure you're still seeing this as I am. What do you say to people that are still calling Butch and Sunny stuck or stranded, quote unquote, and calling Crew-10 a, quote, rescue mission?
You want to do that one, Steve?
First principle in spaceflight, you always have a way for the crew to come home. And Butch and Sunny have had a way to come home all the way back to the crewed flight test mission. If you remember, their vehicle, if there would have been a contingency, they were going to come home in Starliner first. Then we transitioned to the Crew-8 vehicle and then the Crew-9 vehicle. So they've always had a way to come home. To me, we are embarking upon a handover with 2 crews, and Butch and Sunny happen to be part of the expedition now. They've been there for a number of months, almost 10 months now, and they've executed spacewalks and they've done science. And so, for me, it's a normal handover. Uniquely, this time we launched Butch and Sunny with a Starliner, and we're bringing them home on a Dragon. That's the only difference to me, and maybe Ken has something to add.
Yeah, if you look at it mathematically, by percentage of the original planned mission, this is the largest percentage extension, right? That's probably how we engineers will think about it in the future, is mathematically. There's been other really long extensions. We've had other people stay up there a really long time. But if you look at what was expected and what they ended up with, this one was a big percentage of the initial plan. But every astronaut that launches into space, we teach them, don't think about when you're coming home. Think about how well your mission's going, and if you're lucky, you might get to stay longer. And it really is a gift when you get to stay longer in space. On my most recent flight, I did get to stay a little bit longer than we planned, and I was so happy that we did get to stay longer. The reasons were terrible that we stayed longer on our mission. But one of the positives about everything that happened was more time in space. And Don Pettit is up there right now. I flew with Don 20 years ago. The only time we ever came closer to an argument in space was when we argued over who might get to stay longer, because they were talking about having us extend for an extra 6 months and spend a year in space. Neither one of us got to, so we both got home. And then he eventually won that because he flew again and is still up there now.
Standing up, Ken.
Hi, thank you for doing this. I walked in a little late picking up the camera, so I'm wondering about the ISS leak. Can you report anything about that? A lot of people are wondering about that. Is it mitigated? Is it getting worse, getting better? What are you doing? Thanks.
Sure. So you're talking about the Paracol leak at the back end of the Russian service module. And that leak's still ongoing. our Roscosmos keeps that hatch closed for most of the time. So the only time they go in there would be for accessing the Progress vehicle in order to get consumables or supplies out from a Progress vehicle, or in order to specifically do inspection or repair associated with that. We monitor the leak carefully and try to determine whether we have, additional increases in the leak rate. Right now, it's fairly steady, and so. But again, Crew does not go in that module very often. So we just take little short snippets of data here and there as we go. The investigation has been ongoing, and Roscosmos leads the investigation. We have our team as well providing assistance in terms of testing or analysis and providing data. But our team is working very closely with the Roscosmos team on that. I'd say the status has not really changed.
Are they doing any stress testing of the materials to see what it can take up to? Thanks.
So we on the NASA side we do have some of the Russian materials, and we are doing testing on those types of materials, various types of tests that we've pre-coordinated with our Roscosmos colleagues. Our Roscosmos colleagues also, they of course understand their material very well and perform some tests. So the answer is yes, and we are trying to correlate what we're seeing and go over those results as we have them with our Roscosmos colleagues.
Another question to the front of the room on this side, ABC News.
Thank you again. I'm not sure if you've spoken to them yet, but what's been the reaction to the successful launch by the crew, the Sonny and Butch team on the ISS? And how significant is it that we had a female pilot and a female commander on Crew-10?
So first of all, I think it's really cool that we had 2 females in the flight crew, 2 women in the flight crew. And I think it's cool that Anne's one of them because she was one of the first in a 2-woman EVA. I don't know, Sarah wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, I was just telling them before this that I've got 3 daughters at home that I know were watching tonight. And so I was excited to see them on board, and thankful to them for a milestone that hopefully many more will follow after. So.
And Dina may have gotten something from Crew-9. I'm sure they're excited. Have you heard anything yet, Dina?
About coming home?
Yeah, about the fact that Crew-10's on the way.
Oh, well, I have not heard yet, but the launch occurred while the crew was asleep. They might have gotten up and taken a peek. I'm not sure. So I've not really heard anything yet, but it's possible that they were just quietly watching.
I suspect they're excited that there's new faces coming, right, and new people coming, and they know they're going to get to come home with see their families pretty soon. So.
All right, the question there in the 4th row, gentleman back there.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Nick Valencia with CNN. This question is to dovetail off of an earlier question, but for you at SpaceX, Sarah. Ken may not have been part of the conversations for the initial offer from Elon Musk about bringing these astronauts home earlier, but I imagine as the director of Dragon that you might have been. I'd love to know what the specifics were of that offer, what was made, and to who was it made at the Biden administration in the White House.
Yeah, so I wasn't in the conversation either. I'm grateful for the leaders in our nation in the spheres of politics and policy. My sphere is engineering. But what I do know from almost 15 years of working with this exact team with Commercial Crew and ISS is that NASA is always looking at multiple options, every option available for any operation that they may go do, and then many contingency options for when the unexpected inevitably happens. And so I got to see that in this case, and we certainly brought all the ideas we had to the specifics of the operation. And then we were just thankful to be a part of the path that was chosen.
Yeah, SpaceX has been a great partner for us. Whenever we have something come up that's a little bit different on orbit, they help us figure out how to handle it, how to modify Dragon or come up with an extra way of dealing with our different contingencies.
Okay, let's go to the other side of the room now.
Yes, hi, I'm Bert Dick from the National Space Society. My question is for Dina and anyone else who might want to answer. It's always impressive to see the partnerships, the diversity, the collaborative efforts. We have NASA, JAXA, Roscosmos here. How do all those collaborations point to mission success and the objectives of the International Space Station? And also, I work with a lot of students, and for the others, what lessons can I share with students about the success and how this works?
Well, I'll just give you my thoughts on this. You know, the intergovernmental agreement that was signed many years ago and led to the International Space Station. You know, somebody had to think of that and put it on paper, and then as people plowed into trying to actually assemble and build the space station, you can imagine that there was a lot of discussions about how it would be built and who would have what pieces of that. But over time, it's just slowly gotten to a point where on a daily basis, it'd be just like you and I having a conversation, and we do this with our JAXA colleagues and our European colleagues and our Russian colleagues on the ground on a daily basis to operate the station. On board, the crews are having dinner together from different nations. When you're all working together on a common problem, you don't really see, I'd say, any differences. You see each other a little bit more as working toward the same goal. So I just say same as on Earth, when people are aligned on a common goal, that's really helpful. The ISS really is kind of a shining example of what you can do on a huge scale internationally if you're all partnered together. So I'm not sure if I answered all the questions, but that's my thoughts on it.
I thought Anne's words were really poignant when she got to orbit. I think that was in the webcast. Is that when Anne's first words down to the ground team were poignant about collaboration as well?
They were. Yes, they were. Mm-hmm.
All right, the gentleman in the second row has been patiently waiting.
Hi, thanks for being here. Nick Gibson with the Spokesman Review. I'm curious what the last few days were like for the members of Crew-10 following the delay Wednesday. Is there anything you do to help keep them prepared for the mission, and how do they pass the time?
I would say from my perspective, when we called the scrub on Wednesday, they understood, they know what it's like, that when you get in the Dragon, you get in the launch vehicle, there's a chance that you're not going to go that day. They got out. They were very professional, very complimentary. We did a debrief with them after that operation just to make sure there was nothing that we could do better the next time. That went really well. And then they followed kind of the issues and what's happening, maybe spend a little time with each other and maybe study their procedures a little bit more. And then when it's time to go on launch day, you could tell Anne and the crew were ready again. So, and Ken, you've probably been there before. I don't know if you have anything to add.
I've launched on time before. It was rare, but we did launch on time even back in the space shuttle era. And then had missions where we scrubbed lots of times, scrubbed 6 times. And after a while, it gets old, but the first one's kind of nice because you get a chance to rest a little bit. Usually people are tired building up to the launch, and you can catch up with all the notes that you didn't write down, spend a little extra time with your family. So generally that first scrub is kind of nice, but I don't know, you'll have to ask the Crew-10 crew when they come back what they really thought about it.
Jessica Meir had reported out on our broadcast that she's friends with Anne McLean. She said they went to the astronaut beach house. So several members spent the day there with some of their family members. So thank you for that question. We'll take another one here on the first row.
Thank you, appreciate that. Sawyer again with the NSF. This is probably for Sarah. So Crew Dragon Endurance, I know, had to swap out for the new capsule that wasn't ready, but from my understanding, this capsule kind of bounced around again from Crew 9 to Fram 2 to Axiom 4, now to Crew 10. Can you kind of explain why that was and what the SpaceX process is for determining what capsule for what mission?
I think some of those might not have been. I'm trying to remember the history now. I know that, let's see, we had a new capsule originally in preparation. It's now probably going to fly the Axiom mission that's coming up in May. We have 4 or 5 lanes of processing where we get to swap in capsules at different phases of their flow, and we usually have multiple in parallel or some awaiting certain processing steps depending on what their launch date is. And so it's relatively straightforward for us to switch what we're doing in what lane or move capsules around. And we've kept, as I think Steve already mentioned, we've kept our capsules so similar that makes that a lot easier to do. Whenever we roll in changes or upgrades to one capsule, we retrofit all the other capsules with those same changes. And so there's no capsule that's getting behind another capsule where we'd have a lot of work to do if we were to do a swap. We just have a fleet of 5 spacecraft, 5 crew spacecraft and 3 cargo spacecraft that could fly any mission that they need to. So.
Okay, time is almost up. Sorry, Steve.
I was going to say I'd have to go back and look. I think at one point the new capsule was you're testing my memory, but I think at one point we were going to fly it on Crew-9 maybe, and then we moved off of that new capsule off of Crew-9. But I would say that building a new capsule, it takes a lot of hard work and dedication, and building some new components up. You know, we had built the first 4 capsules kind of in fairly rapid succession over a couple-year period, 206, 207, and then 210 and 212. And then now this one's a little lagging behind, so sometimes it takes a little longer when you got a vehicle that's lagging behind. But the thing I would most compliment our team and SpaceX on is the adaptability. When we looked at the manifest and saw that, hey, we'd really like to fly this mission in March ahead of the Soyuz handover, and we looked at Capsule 210, and our team started looking at it to see if we could go really get all the data reviewed. We pivoted together very quickly, and that is the beauty of having multiple capsules ready at multiple times for multiple missions. And we, NASA, appreciate that, and we took advantage of that. So,
Okay, our time is almost up. We'll take another question from NBC News in the back.
Gina, this might be a question for you. 2 quick ones. First, you mentioned that 4 a.m. Wednesday might be the earliest opportunity for Crew-9 undocking. So is there a world where they would have splashdown? I know we don't know exactly where they're targeting, but would that potentially be the same day? What would be the soonest possible? And then the other question I had is, we know Elon Musk talked about the possibility of deorbiting the ISS as soon as 2027. I'm curious what your thoughts are if that's possible.
To take the first question is, I think it is possible we could splash on the same day. Certainly, very, very possible. Again, it just depends on the transit time associated with where the orbit lines up, and then the splashdown opportunity that we select on the Gulf Coast. And then I'll just caution you, though, that it could be difficult to find good weather on the very first day. So if you were even trying to pinpoint the day, I'm not sure we've really done that yet. So that would be the no earlier than day. And then in terms of ISS, we are following our policy for the current administration has us deorbiting in 2030, and that's where our international partners have agreed to. We have Roscosmos who's agreed to go to 2028, and they're working on, we're working with everyone on the deorbit process, more working in that general direction. So that's where we are with that. I don't know, Ken, if you had anything to add.
Just that I would say, Elon's all about going to Mars. He has been since he started SpaceX and before that, right? So it doesn't surprise me that he wants to focus on that. That excites me too. But what I'll tell you is our work in low Earth orbit, our work with ISS, the future work we'll do on our commercial LEO platforms, low Earth orbit platforms, is about Mars too. And one of the fastest ways to get to Mars is to do work in low Earth orbit. So I think we're going to have a lot more time with astronauts doing their work close to Earth in orbit nearby.
Okay, we just have a few more seconds, so we can grab one more from Will, and we'll wrap it up.
Thanks. I'll make this a quick one. Regarding the future of Dragon return, starting with Crew-10 when they are ready to come back, I know the plan is to splash off the coast of California, but will a Dragon recovery vessel stay in Florida as a contingency, or will both of them move to the West Coast for that? Thanks.
So we only need one vessel on the West Coast for the specific setup over here. We have 3 landing sites. They're all very close together. There's no need for with the panhandle of Florida, you kind of needed 2 to take advantage of the entire Florida coast within a certain distance that you could helicopter the crew and cargo to their final destinations. We don't need that over on the West Coast. We've actually already moved a vessel, Shannon, over to the West Coast, and it's undergoing final preparations for for its first missions. And then we actually had a number of facilities, and then some that we're upgrading, some that we're building over here. You may remember we returned 20 Dragons in the early cargo program over on the West Coast, and so we got to leverage that. But yet we have entirely new requirements with Commercial Crew Program and science processing that we've benefited from these later contracts that we want to continue on the West Coast as well. So some new stuff, but also some heritage.
All right, thank you all for your questions today, and thank you to the panel for coming in and answering them. If you'd like to listen in to crew audio as they make their way to the ISS, you can snap the QR code that you see at the bottom of your screen. We'll be streaming mission audio commentary at nasa.gov/multimedia. And to continue following the Crew-10 mission, stay tuned to our streaming platform, NASA Plus, or online at plus.nasa.gov. We leave you now with highlights, a look back from suit up to launch. Crew-10 is getting suited up, ready to go. Time now for the traditional card game. Crew-10 walking down the hallway. And here they come, taking their first steps outside as they prepare for their journey to the International Space Station. And we are off. The crew on their way to Space Launch Pad 39A. Anne McLean, Nicole Ayers making their way into their Dragon spacecraft Endurance. And here come our mission specialists down the crew access arm, Takuya Onishi and Kirill Peskov.
There they are, rotating back.
Dragon, SpaceX side hatches closed. Ignition and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go NASA Crew-10. Copy, what else? Vehicles pitching downrange.
Space Station. 1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and Crew-10. We're continuing to get good call-outs on the first stage performance so far.